I'll marry you. 4 words, spoken in jest before 200 witnesses, accepted in dead earnest by the one woman who shouldn't have believed them. Duke Adrian Viremont didn't know, couldn't have known, that Lydia Hale had been in love with him for 3 years, that she'd memorized the way he laughed at terrible poetry, that she'd already imagined their children's names. He thought it was a game. She heard a promise, and in one reckless moment at the Ashworth ball, a joke became a noose neither of them could slip. If you want to see how far a lie can travel before it strangles the liar, if you want to know whether love built on quicksand can ever find solid ground, stay with me. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story reaches. Hit that like button. Because what comes next isn't pretty, but it's real. The Ashworth ballroom smelled like lilies and ambition. Chandeliers dripped light onto marble floors where London's finest circled each other like sharks in silk and wool. Adrian Viremont stood near the terrace doors, champagne in hand, wearing the expression he'd perfected over 28 years. Politely interested, vaguely amused, fundamentally bored. Your Grace, you simply must tell Lady Pemberton about your trip to Vienna. Mrs. Ashworth clutched his elbow with the desperation of a hostess who'd spent a fortune on this evening and needed her prize stallion to perform. She's absolutely fascinated by the diplomatic intricacies. Lady Pemberton was 60 if she was a day, with eyes sharp enough to gut a man at 20 paces. She wasn't fascinated by diplomacy. She was hunting for scandal to trade over tea. The diplomatic intricacies, Adrian said smoothly, consisted primarily of avoiding my cousin Leopold, who believes every conversation should begin with a lecture on tariff reform. Polite laughter rippled through the cluster of women surrounding him. He'd learned early that humor was the best shield. Make them laugh, and they'd forgive almost anything. Make them laugh often enough, and they'd stop expecting substance. But surely the opera was magnificent. This from Miss Caroline Hart, whose mother had been positioning her in Adrian's orbit for 3 seasons running. Magnificent, he agreed. I understood perhaps 1 word in 5, but the soprano had exceptional lungs. More laughter. He took a long drink of champagne and scanned the room for escape routes. The terrace was too obvious. The card room was packed with men twice his age complaining about their gout. The library. How fascinating that you attended the opera for the music, Your Grace, when most men of your station go to be seen. The voice cut through the pleasant murmur like a knife through butter, clear, precise, edged with something that might have been humor or might have been contempt. Adrian turned. She stood at the edge of the group, dressed in deep green that should have been dowdy, but somehow wasn't. Dark hair pulled back severely. No jewelry except small pearl earrings. Lydia Hale. He knew her vaguely. Daughter of some minor baronet, worked with charities, had opinions about things. Miss Hale. He inclined his head. I didn't realize you were an expert on the habits of men of my station. I'm not an expert, she said. I'm simply observant. There's a difference. The women around them went very still. One didn't challenge a duke in public, not directly, not unless one was angling for humiliation or had nothing to lose. Adrian felt something shift in his chest. Interest, maybe? Or irritation? Hard to tell. Observant, he repeated. And what have your observations taught you tonight? That you're bored. She said it matter-of-factly, as if commenting on the weather. That you've been standing here for 15 minutes saying clever things that mean nothing, waiting for an excuse to leave. Mrs. Ashworth made a small sound of distress. Lady Pemberton's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. Adrian smiled. Should I be offended or impressed? Neither. Lydia tilted her head slightly. You should be honest. But I suppose that's too much to ask. Miss Hale? Caroline interjected quickly, her voice tight with false sweetness. Perhaps you should save such bold observations for your charity meetings. I'm sure the poor appreciate your directness. The poor appreciate honesty more than the rich do, Lydia said. They can't afford comfortable lies. Adrian laughed. Actually laughed, not the practiced chuckle he deployed at parties. You think we live on comfortable lies? I think you do. Her eyes, gray, he noticed, like storm clouds, fixed on him without wavering. I think you've built an entire life on them. Charm instead of substance. Wit instead of conviction. You're 28 years old and you've accomplished nothing except being charming at the right gatherings. The silence that followed was absolute. Someone coughed. Mrs. Ashworth looked ready to faint. Caroline's face had gone an unbecoming shade of red. Adrian should have been furious, should have delivered a cutting remark that put this nobody in her place, should have walked away and let the gossips tear her to shreds. Instead, he felt alive for the first time in months. "Nothing except being charming," he said slowly. "That's quite an indictment." "It's not an indictment. It's an observation." Lydia's voice remained steady. "You have power, wealth, influence. You could do something meaningful. Instead, you waltz from party to party saying clever things that everyone will forget by morning. And you've done what exactly? Besides judge people at parties you weren't invited to?" "I was invited," she said quietly. "Mrs. Ashworth supports the women's shelter I help run. And I've spent the last 5 years making sure women who've lost everything have a place to sleep that isn't a gutter. It's not glamorous. Nobody writes about it in the society pages. But it's real." Adrian felt something uncomfortable twist in his stomach. Shame, maybe. Or anger at feeling ashamed. "How noble," he said, and hated how petty it sounded. "Not noble, necessary." She turned as if to leave, then paused. "Enjoy your champagne, Your Grace. I'm sure it tastes better than purpose." She walked away. Actually walked away, leaving him standing there with a dozen witnesses watching to see how he'd react. Lady Pemberton cleared her throat. "Well, I never." "Insufferable girl," Caroline muttered. "Someone should teach her." "Excuse me," Adrian said abruptly. He handed his champagne glass to a startled footman and followed Lydia across the ballroom. He caught up to her near the refreshment table. She was reaching for a glass of water, her hand steady despite the gauntlet she'd just thrown. "Miss Hale." She turned, unsurprised. "Your Grace. You just eviscerated me in front of half of London's elite." "Only a quarter," she corrected. "The other half are in the card room." "Do you do that often? Publicly flay people?" "Only when they deserve it." She took a sip of water. "And only when I'm reasonably certain they won't do anything about it." "Reasonably certain?" "You're a duke. You could destroy my reputation with a word, but you won't." "Why not?" "Because you're bored, not cruel, and because deep down you know I'm right." Adrian stared at her. She stared back, unflinching. "You're infuriating," he said. "So I've been told." "And probably correct. Definitely correct." He laughed again. "What exactly do you want from me, Miss Hale? Confession? Repentance? A donation to your shelter?" "Nothing." She set down her glass. "I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know that some of us see through the performance." The performance. The charming Duke with nothing behind the smile. Her voice softened slightly. It must be exhausting. Something in her tone, pity, maybe, or understanding, made his throat tight. "You don't know anything about me," he said. "I know you're smart enough to be dangerous if you cared about something. I know you read philosophy and hide it from your friends because they'd mock you. I know you avoid your father's estate because you hate being reminded of responsibility." She paused. "And I know you're lonely." Adrian felt like she'd reached into his chest and squeezed. "How?" "I pay attention." She picked up her glass again. "Unlike most people here, I actually listen when people talk, even when they're trying not to say anything. That's either incredibly perceptive or incredibly presumptuous. Can it be both?" They stood there in a pocket of silence while the party swirled around them. Adrian felt off balance in a way he couldn't name. She'd stripped him bare in 2 conversations, seen through every defense he'd spent years building. And she wasn't even trying to flirt. "Miss Hale," he said slowly, "you might be the most dangerous woman I've ever met." "Because I tell the truth?" "Because you don't want anything from me. Everyone wants something. Money, access, connections, marriage." He trailed off. "What do you want?" "I told you. Nothing." "Everyone wants something." She studied him for a long moment. "I want you to stop wasting yourself, but that's not something I can take from you. It's something you'd have to choose." Before he could respond, a voice boomed across the ballroom. "Viramont, stop monopolizing the only interesting woman here." Lord Thornhill, drunk and delighted with himself, was weaving toward them with a cluster of equally inebriated friends in tow. "We were just discussing your Grace's many talents," Lydia said coolly. "Talents!" Thornhill laughed. "The man's talent is avoiding marriage proposals. 3 seasons and every mother in London's given up on him. Can you blame them? One of Thornhill's companions, Westbrook, Adrian thought, chimed in. Man's too clever by half. Slips every trap. It's not cleverness, Adrian said, falling back into the familiar banter. It's self-preservation. Self-preservation! Thornhill slapped him on the shoulder hard enough to hurt. That's rich. Man's got a title, fortune, estates. And he's preserving himself from what? Happiness? Happiness is overrated, Adrian said lightly. I prefer freedom. Freedom, Westbrook guffawed. He thinks he's free. Someone should tell him, we're all trapped, old boy. Only question is what kind of cage you pick. Lydia was watching this exchange with an expression Adrian couldn't read. Not disgust, exactly. Something colder. Disappointment, maybe. Miss Hale doesn't think I should have freedom, Adrian heard himself say. She thinks I should have purpose. Purpose? Thornhill looked at Lydia with exaggerated interest. What sort of purpose does a duke need, according to you? The same purpose anyone needs, Lydia said quietly. Something worth waking up for besides his own amusement. Oh, she's got him there, Westbrook crowed. What do you wake up for, Viremont, besides avoiding your mother's letters? Coffee, Adrian said, and the faint hope that something interesting might happen. Interesting? Thornhill leaned closer to Lydia conspiratorially, breathing whiskey fumes. You know what would be interesting. If our duke here finally fell into Parsons' mousetrap. I'd rather be drawn and quartered, Adrian said. See? See? Thornhill turned to his friends triumphantly. He'd rather die than marry. That's dedication to bachelorhood. Or cowardice, Lydia murmured. Adrian's head snapped toward her. What did you say? I said perhaps it's cowardice. Not wanting to be tied to another person. Not wanting to be accountable. Not wanting someone to see through you every single day. Her eyes held his. That would be uncomfortable, wouldn't it? The room had gone quiet again. People were listening now, drawn by the scent of conflict like moths to flame. Cowardice, Adrian repeated. His pulse was hammering. You think I'm afraid? I think you're terrified. She said it gently, almost kindly. I think you're so afraid of being known that you've built walls out of jokes and charm and careful distance. And I think calling it freedom makes you feel better about it. Thornhill whistled low. She's got teeth, this one. Viremont, Westbrook said gleefully. Are you going to let her call you a coward? Adrian's mind was racing. He was angry, genuinely angry now, but also exhilarated. Nobody talked to him like this. Nobody dared. Miss Hale, he said, his voice carrying across the room, you seem to have a very low opinion of my character. Not low, she corrected, just accurate. And you think marriage would solve this? Make me less of a coward? I think marriage would force you to be accountable to someone besides yourself. Whether that would make you less of a coward would depend entirely on who you married and whether you were brave enough to let them in. The words were out before he'd thought them through. Then perhaps I should marry you. Absolute silence. Lydia went very still. Her face showed nothing. No shock, no pleasure, no anger. Just a careful blankness that made his stomach drop. I mean, he said quickly, trying to laugh it off. Since you're so convinced it would improve my character, yes. The word fell like a stone into still water. Adrian's brain stuttered to a halt. What? Yes. Lydia's voice was calm, steady. I accept. Someone gasped. Thornhill started laughing, then stopped when he realized no one else was. Miss Hale, Adrian said carefully. I was joking. Were you? She tilted her head. In front of all these witnesses? You publicly proposed marriage, and I publicly accepted. That's not a joke. That's a contract. I wasn't. He couldn't get the words out. His collar felt too tight. You said you should marry me, Lydia continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. You said it loudly, clearly, before witnesses. Now you want to take it back? I was being facetious. You were being reckless. Something flickered in her eyes, hurt, maybe, or empty anger, or something deeper. But you said it, and I heard it, and so did everyone else here. Mrs. Ashworth looked ready to swoon. Caroline had gone pale. Lady Pemberton was watching with undisguised fascination. Adrian felt panic rising in his chest. Miss Hale, please be reasonable. I am being reasonable. You're a duke. Your word is supposed to mean something. She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only he could hear. Or is that another comfortable lie? That honor matters, that promises count. This isn't a promise. What is it then? Her eyes searched his face. A joke? An amusing thing you said because you were angry and wanted to win an argument? She raised her voice again. Is your word worth so little that you throw around marriage proposals for sport? She'd backed him into a corner, and she knew it. In front of London's social elite, there was no way to retreat without looking like exactly what she'd called him. A coward. He couldn't finish the sentence. Lady Ashworth, Lydia said, turning to their shocked hostess, would you be kind enough to announce it? His Grace has just done me the very great honor of proposing marriage, and I have accepted. Mrs. Ashworth looked at Adrian, silently begging him to deny it. He opened his mouth, closed it. Every exit had been sealed. If he denied it now, he'd be breaking a public promise. Society would tear him apart, not for the rejection, but for the dishonor. For treating his word like garbage. The scandal would follow him for years. If he confirmed it, he'd be trapped in an engagement to a woman he barely knew, based on a joke that had gone catastrophically wrong. Lydia waited. The room waited, and Adrian realized, with creeping horror, that he'd just destroyed his own life trying to be clever. His Grace seems overcome, Lydia said sweetly. Perhaps the shock of finding someone willing to accept him. Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Adrian found his voice. Miss Hale and I need to speak privately. Of course, she said, but I think the announcement should be made first, so everyone knows. No confusion later. She was relentless. Absolutely relentless. Mrs. Ashworth looked between them, then seemed to make a decision. Ladies and gentlemen, her voice shook slightly, I have the most wonderful news. Duke Adrian Viremont has just proposed to Miss Lydia Hale, and she has accepted. The room erupted. Applause, gasps, excited chatter. Women rushed toward Lydia to offer congratulations. Men clapped Adrian on the back, offering lewd jokes and advice. Through it all, Lydia stood perfectly still, a small smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. Adrian felt like he was drowning. The library was blessedly quiet. Adrian had managed to extract them both from the chaos with murmured excuses about needing a moment alone with his fiancée. The word tasted like ashes. Lydia stood by the window, her back to him, looking out at the dark garden. You can't actually expect this to stand, he said. Why not? Because I didn't mean it. She turned. In the lamplight, her face looked different, older maybe, tired. I know you didn't mean it, she said quietly. I've known you didn't mean it from the moment you said it. The admission hit him like a fist. Then why? Because I'm tired of men like you saying things you don't mean and facing no consequences. Her voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. Because you stood there and proposed marriage as a joke, to humiliate me, to win an argument, to prove you could, and you expected me to laugh it off, to make it easy for you. I wasn't trying to humiliate you, weren't you? She crossed her arms. I called you a coward, and you couldn't stand it, so you threw out a marriage proposal like it was nothing, like I was nothing, a punchline. Guilt twisted in his gut. I didn't think... No, you didn't. She looked at him with something that might have been disappointment or might have been resignation. You never do. That's your whole problem. You drift through life saying clever things, making people laugh, and never thinking about the consequences because there never are any. Not for you. So this is... what? Punishment? This is consequences. She moved closer. You made a public proposal. I accepted. Now you have two choices. Honor it or break it and prove you're exactly what I said you were. This is insane. This is justice. Her eyes were hard. You wanted to make me uncomfortable. You wanted to see me squirm. Well, congratulations. You succeeded. And now you get to live with what you've done. Adrian ran a hand through his hair, panic and anger warring in his chest. You can't force me to marry you. I'm not forcing you to do anything. You can break the engagement tomorrow. Tell everyone it was a mistake. Face the scandal. She paused. Or you can honor your word. My word that I gave as a joke. Your word that you gave in public, before witnesses, using the exact phrasing of a marriage proposal. She didn't raise her voice. Intent doesn't matter. Actions do. And your action was to propose. Mine was to accept. Why? The question burst out of him. Why would you want to marry someone who doesn't want to marry you? Something flickered across her face. Pain, quickly hidden. Who says I want to marry you? You accepted. I accepted the opportunity to teach you a lesson. Her smile was bitter. You think you're the only one who can be reckless? The only one who can make a point? They stared at each other in the lamplight. Adrian's mind was spinning, looking for exits, finding none. There has to be a way out of this, he said finally. There is. You break the engagement and face the consequences. You keep saying that like the consequences would only hurt me. They would hurt me more, Lydia admitted. I'd be the jilted woman, the one a duke proposed to and then rejected. My reputation would be shredded, but I've never had much of a reputation to protect. You, on the other hand, she let the sentence hang. So we're both trapped. We're both accountable. She turned back to the window. For the first time in your life, Your Grace, you have to deal with the consequences of your own words. How does it feel? Like hell. Good. There was no satisfaction in her voice, just exhaustion. Maybe now you'll think before you speak. Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to rage, wanted to find some clever way out of this disaster. But looking at her silhouette against the window, he felt something else entirely. Admiration, maybe. She'd beaten him at his own game, using nothing but his own words and the rules he'd never bothered to question. What do we do now? He asked quietly. Now? She didn't turn around. Now we go back out there and smile and accept congratulations. And tomorrow we figure out what comes next. You haven't thought this through. Neither did you, when you proposed. Finally, she looked at him. We're even. The Ashworth ball concluded in a blur of champagne and congratulations. Adrian smiled until his face hurt, accepting backslaps and ribald jokes with the ease of long practice. Beside him, Lydia played her part perfectly, blushing at appropriate moments, laughing softly, letting him guide her through the crowd. To everyone watching, they looked like a perfect match. A duke and his surprising choice, romantic, unexpected, absolutely believable. Only Adrian felt the tremor in her hand when he led her through a waltz. Only he saw the tightness around her eyes when someone made a joke about their whirlwind courtship. You're good at this, he murmured as they turned across the floor. At what? Pretending. Her smile didn't waver. I learned from the best. When he finally delivered her to her father, a bewildered baronet who kept looking between them like he'd missed something crucial, Adrian felt like he'd run a marathon. Your Grace, Sir Hale said nervously. This is quite unexpected. Life is full of surprises, Sir Hale. Adrian bowed over Lydia's hand, the gesture that had sealed his fate. I hope you'll forgive the unconventional proposal. Your daughter rather swept me off my feet. Lydia's fingers tightened on his for just a moment. Warning? Threat? He couldn't tell. We'll call on you tomorrow, she said smoothly, to discuss arrangements. Of course. Sir Hale still looked dazed. Yes. Tomorrow. Adrian escaped into the night, his carriage cutting through London streets that suddenly felt too narrow, too close. His valet was waiting when he stumbled into his townhouse, but Adrian waved him away. He needed to think. In his study, he poured whiskey with shaking hands and tried to understand what the hell had just happened. He'd proposed. As a joke. To win an argument. She'd accepted. To teach him a lesson. To force accountability. And now they were engaged. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't strangling him. Adrian drank deeply and stared at the bookshelves lining his walls. Philosophy, poetry, history, all the things he read in private and never discussed because it would ruin his carefully constructed image of charming vapidity. She'd known about that. She'd seen through everything. I know you're lonely. The words echoed in his head. He drank again, trying to drown them out. He could break the engagement. Tomorrow. Clean break. Face the scandal. But she was right about the consequences. Society would eviscerate him. Not for rejecting her, women got rejected all the time. But for making a public proposal and then taking it back. For treating his word like it meant nothing. His honor, The one thing his father had hammered into him before dying would be destroyed. Consequences, he muttered into his glass. She wants me to face consequences. The worst part was that she wasn't wrong. He had been reckless, had thrown around a marriage proposal like it was a joke, had assumed he could say anything without cost because he always had before, and now he was paying. Adrian refilled his glass and walked to the window. London sprawled below him, thousands of lives he'd never thought about, problems he'd never considered. You could do something meaningful. Could he? Or was he exactly what she'd said, charming and empty and fundamentally useless? The question followed him to bed, where he didn't sleep. By morning, half of London knew about the engagement. By afternoon, his mother's letter arrived, full of exclamations and demands for details. By evening, when his solicitor arrived looking worried, Adrian realized just how thoroughly trapped he was. "Your Grace," Pemberton said carefully, setting down his satchel, "I've heard rumors about an engagement. Not rumors, fact." Adrian poured tea with steady hands. "Practice. I'm engaged to Miss Lydia Hale." "I see." Pemberton's face was carefully neutral. "May I speak frankly? Have you ever done otherwise?" Breaking an engagement of this nature, public, witnessed, formally announced, would be, Pemberton paused, choosing words carefully, catastrophic, for your reputation, your honor, and potentially your position in society. "I'm aware. There would also be legal complications. A breach of promise suit." "She wouldn't. You don't know that." Pemberton leaned forward. "Your Grace, I don't know what happened at that ball, but if this engagement is not sincere, you need to end it now, before contracts are drawn, before expectations solidify. The longer you wait, the worse it gets." "Yes, I understand." Adrian set down his cup. "What if I don't want to end it?" Pemberton blinked. "I'm sorry? What if I go through with it?" "Marry her, you mean?" "That is generally what one does with an engagement." "Your Grace," Pemberton struggled visibly, "forgive me, but you've known this woman for less than a day. You've never expressed interest in marriage. This seems extremely precipitous." "Life is precipitous, Pemberton. That's what makes it interesting." But even as he said it, Adrian knew he was lying. This wasn't interesting. This was terrifying. He was bound to a woman he didn't love, who didn't love him, in a trap of his own making, and the only way out was to destroy his honor or destroy his freedom. When Pemberton left, still looking worried, Adrian returned to the window. Evening was falling. Somewhere in London, Lydia was probably dealing with her own version of this hell. Family questions, social expectations, the weight of a future neither of them had planned. He wondered if she was regretting it yet. He wondered if she'd ever really wanted this, or if she'd been so angry that she'd grabbed the knife without thinking about how deep it would cut. The door opened. His butler appeared, silver tray in hand. "A letter, Your Grace, from Miss Hale." Adrian took it with fingers that didn't quite shake. The handwriting was precise, controlled. "Your Grace, I imagine you spent last night contemplating escape routes. I did the same. We are both trapped by our own actions. You by your reckless words, me by my reckless acceptance. I propose a meeting. Tomorrow, 3 o'clock. Kensington Gardens. We need to discuss what happens next. Sincerely, Lydia Hale." No warmth, no apology, just pragmatism. Adrian read it 3 times, looking for subtext, finding only exhaustion. She wanted to talk. That meant there was still a chance to fix this, to find a way out that didn't destroy them both. Or maybe she wanted to twist the knife deeper. With Lydia Hale, he was learning. Anything was possible. He sat down and wrote his reply. "Miss Hale, 3 o'clock. I'll be there. Adrian." No title, no formality. They'd passed that point somewhere between her calling him a coward and him proposing marriage in front of half of London. He sealed the letter and gave it to his butler, then poured himself another drink and tried not to think about tomorrow. But tomorrow came anyway, relentless as dawn. Kensington Gardens looked different in daylight, less romantic, more exposed. Adrian arrived early, which annoyed him. Punctuality suggested he cared, and found a bench near the Serpentine where they could talk without being overheard. The morning papers had been brutal. 3 separate gossip columns speculating about the whirlwind engagement between the eligible Duke Viramont and the surprisingly accomplished Miss Hale. One had called her plain but principled. Another suggested Adrian had finally found someone to reform his rakish ways. He'd thrown them all in the fire. At 3 minutes past, Lydia appeared on the path. She wore gray today, practical and severe. Her hair pulled back so tightly it must have hurt. No maid accompanying her. No chaperone. Either she didn't care about propriety or she wanted privacy more than reputation. "You're late," he said when she reached him. "You're early." She sat without waiting for invitation. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "Where else would I be?" "Running. Men like you are good at that." Adrian bit back a sharp response. Starting a fight wouldn't help. "I got your letter." "Obviously." She folded her hands in her lap. In daylight, he could see the shadows under her eyes. She hadn't slept either. "We need to talk about what happens next." "Agreed. I've been thinking, I'll release you from the engagement." The words hit him like cold water. Adrian stared at her. "What?" "I'll release you." Her voice was calm, matter of fact. "We'll announce that we realized we weren't suited. Mutual decision. Quick, clean break." "That's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. More fighting, more consequences." He studied her face. "What changed?" Lydia looked out at the water. "I spent all night thinking about what I'd done, why I'd done it, and I realized I was just as reckless as you. More, maybe, because I knew better. You were angry. Anger isn't an excuse. You taught me that last night." A bitter smile crossed her face. "I trapped you in an engagement you didn't want because I was hurt and angry and wanted to hurt you back. That's not justice. That's just cruelty." Adrian felt something uncomfortable shift in his chest. He'd expected her to gloat, to press her advantage, not this quiet self-recrimination. "So, you're letting me go?" "Yes." "And your reputation?" "Will survive. Or it won't. Either way, I won't force someone into marriage because I made a point badly." She finally looked at him. "I'm sorry. For accepting your proposal when I knew it was a joke. For using your honor against you. For all of it." The apology sat between them like something fragile. Adrian should have felt relief. This was the exit he'd been desperately searching for. Clean, simple, no scandal that would follow him for years. Instead, he felt angry. "That's it?" His voice came out sharper than intended. "You upend my entire life, trap me in front of London society, and now you're just releasing me? Like I'm a fish you've decided isn't worth keeping?" Lydia blinked. "I thought you'd be happy." "Happy? You called me a coward. You said I drift through life without consequences. And now when those consequences arrive, you're taking them away." He stood, pacing. "Do you know what I've been doing since last night? Thinking, actually thinking, for the first time in years. About my life. About what I've done with it. About who I am when I stop performing." "Your Grace, don't." He wheeled on her. "Don't call me that right now. You were right. About all of it. I am a coward. I do hide behind charm. I have wasted 28 years being clever and accomplishing nothing." The admission burned, and I was starting to think maybe this disaster was the push I needed to actually become something. "You don't need a fake engagement for that." "Fake?" He laughed harshly. "It stopped being fake the moment you accepted. The moment London knew. The moment I had to sit in my study and face what I'd done." He sat back down, suddenly exhausted. "You wanted me to face consequences. Well, I'm facing them. And you don't get to take them away just because you feel guilty." Lydia stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You want to stay engaged?" "I don't know what I want." Adrian ran his hands through his hair. "But I know running away from this, letting you take the blame for ending it, would prove you right. That I'm exactly the coward you said I was." "This is insane. You said that last night. I agreed then too." He looked at her directly. "Here's what I know. You're the first person in years who's been honest with me. Really honest. Not polite lying disguised as flattery. You saw through everything I've built and you called me on it. And instead of hating you for it, He trailed off, searching for words. "I respected it. Respect you." Respect isn't love. No. But it's more than I've felt for anyone in a long time. He leaned forward. What if we tried? Tried what? This. The engagement. Actually getting to know each other instead of running away. That's ridiculous. Probably. He almost smiled. But no more ridiculous than accepting a proposal you knew was fake. No more ridiculous than building your whole life around helping people while refusing help yourself. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I mean, I asked around about you yesterday. Your shelter is drowning in debt. You haven't taken a salary in 6 months. You're working yourself to exhaustion trying to save everyone except yourself. He watched her face close down. See? We both hide. You just hide behind virtue instead of charm. That's different. Is it? You judge me for wasting my privilege while you martyr yourself. Which one of us is really brave? Lydia stood abruptly. You don't know anything about my life. I know you lied to your father about how bad the finances are. I know you sold your mother's jewelry to cover last month's rent for the shelter. I know you haven't bought yourself a new dress in 2 years. He stood too, matching her intensity. I know you're exhausted and angry, and so focused on everyone else's problems that you've forgotten you're allowed to have needs too. Stop it. Why? Because I'm right? He stepped closer. You wanted honesty. Here's honesty. You accepted my proposal because part of you wanted it. Part of you has been watching me for months, maybe longer, wondering if I could ever be more than the joke I present to the world. And when I proposed, even as a joke, you grabbed it with both hands because you're just as lonely as I am. That's not... Her voice cracked. You're wrong. Am I? Adrian gentled his tone. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you didn't hope, even for a second, that maybe I meant it. Lydia's composure finally shattered. Her hands were shaking. It doesn't matter what I hoped. You didn't mean it. You said so yourself. I didn't mean it then. The words came out before he could stop them. But I'm starting to think maybe I could mean it now. Silence stretched between them. A bird called from somewhere across the water. 2 children ran past, laughing, oblivious to the wreckage happening on this bench. This is madness, Lydia whispered. Complete madness, Adrian agreed. But here's what I propose. We don't end the engagement. Not yet. We give ourselves time. A real courtship. Get to know each other without the performance. And at the end, a month, 2 months, however long it takes, we make a real decision. Based on truth, not anger or fear or whatever the hell last night was. And if we decide we're not suited, then we end it mutually, just like you said. No blame, no scandal. We tried. It didn't work. We part as friends. Friends. She said it like the word was foreign. Or enemies. I'm flexible. He held out his hand. What do you say, Miss Hale? Want to see if a coward and a martyr can build something real? She looked at his hand like it might bite her. Why are you doing this? Because you scare the hell out of me. He said it simply, honestly. Because in one night you've made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. Because I think maybe you could make me better, if I let you, if I'm brave enough. I don't want to fix you. I don't want to be fixed. I want to be challenged, pushed, forced to be more than I am. He kept his hand extended. You said I need purpose. Maybe you're it. That's too much pressure. Then share the weight. Let me help with your shelter. Let me use my useless privilege for something that matters. His voice softened. Let me try to be worth your respect. Lydia stared at him for a long moment. Her eyes were wet, but she didn't cry. Instead, she took a shaky breath and said, This is the stupidest thing I've ever done. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. She didn't take his hand. I have conditions. Of course you do. Real courtship means real honesty. No performance. No charm. If we do this, I need to know who you actually are. Agreed. Same for you. No martyrdom, no hiding behind work. I get to keep running the shelter. I'd never ask you to stop, but I get to help. She considered this. Fine. And we tell no one about the original proposal being a joke. As far as the world knows, this is real. It is real, Adrian said. That's the point. You know what I mean. No one can know it started as a mistake. Agreed. He lowered his hand. Anything else? Yes. She met his eyes. If you hurt me, if you treat this like a game or decide you're bored, I will destroy you completely. Your reputation, your honor, everything. Do you understand? The threat should have scared him. Instead, it made him want to laugh. Understood. And if you push me away or refuse to let me in because you're too afraid to be vulnerable, if you use work as an excuse to avoid intimacy, I'll call you on it every single time. You don't get to equal terms, Miss Hale. You get to threaten me, I get to challenge you. He smiled, and for once it wasn't charming or practiced. It was real. We're both going into this terrified. Might as well be terrified together. Lydia stood there, the wind pulling strands of hair from her severe bun. She looked young suddenly, and uncertain, and absolutely beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness, and everything to do with the fierce intelligence burning behind her eyes. 1 month, she said finally. We try this for 1 month. Real courtship, real honesty. At the end, we reassess. 1 month. Adrian extended his hand again. Deal? This time she took it. Her grip was firm, her palm warm. They shook like business partners sealing a contract, which, in a way, they were. A contract written in hope and fear and the desperate need to be something more than they'd been. So, Adrian said, not letting go yet, where do we start? I have no idea. Lydia almost smiled. I've never done this before. Neither have I. Not really. He released her hand reluctantly. Usually there's dancing and small talk and everything choreographed within an inch of its life. Sounds horrible. It is. He sat back down, gestured for her to join him. Tell me about the shelter. Why? Because you love it. Because it matters to you. Because I want to understand what drives you to sell your mother's jewelry, to keep it running. Pain flashed across her face. Who told you about that? Does it matter? Yes. Your housekeeper. I paid her to talk. At her outraged expression, he added, which was wrong, I know, but I needed to understand who you were before we had this conversation. Consider it the last dishonest thing I do. The last? I'm trying, Lydia. Work with me here. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, sat down beside him, maintaining careful distance. The shelter houses 16 women, sometimes more if we squeeze. Most have left violent situations. Some have children, all have nowhere else to go. How long have you run it? 5 years? Started it after my mother died. She used to do charity work, but it was all surface. Tea parties and donation drives. I wanted something real. So you built it yourself. With help, donations, volunteers. We were doing well until last year, then our primary benefactor died and his son cut the funding. Her voice hardened. That it was throwing money away on women who should try harder to keep their husbands. Adrian felt anger spike. What's his name? Why? So I can have a word with him. You can't just intimidate people into donating. Watch me. He wasn't joking. You need money. I have money. I have access to people with more money. Let me help. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's investment. You've built something that matters. I want to be part of it. He turned to face her fully. Besides, you agreed to let me help. Those were your terms. She looked torn between gratitude and suspicion. You're serious. Completely. I'll write you a check today to cover the immediate debts. Then we'll host a fundraiser, pull in every wealthy name in London and guilt them into opening their purses. Just like that. Just like that. He smiled slightly. Turns out my useless social connections might actually be useful. Lydia was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was rough. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'll probably make a mess of it. Probably. But she smiled, just a little. What do you want in return? Honesty, remember? Adrian leaned back. I want you to stop treating me like I'm made of glass, or like I'm the enemy. I want real conversations, arguments even. I want to know what you think about things that matter. That's dangerous. I know. Terrifying. He wasn't being sarcastic. But if we're doing this, if we're actually trying, I need to know you. Not the version you show donors. Not the competent woman who has everything under control. The real you. The real me isn't very impressive. I'll be the judge of that. They sat in silence for a while, watching the water. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't hostile either. Something new, fragile, uncertain. I was 15 when I first saw you, Lydia said suddenly. Adrian looked at her, surprised. What? At some garden party, you were 19, home from university, you made everyone laugh. She kept her eyes on the water. I thought you were the most magnificent person I'd ever seen. His throat went tight. Lydia, I spent 3 years watching you at parties, balls, dinners, building up this idea of who you were in my head. Her voice was carefully neutral. And then last year, at the Thornhill wedding, I actually heard you talk. Really talk. You were in the library with Lord Pemberton, discussing philosophy. You were brilliant, passionate, nothing like the performance you give in public. You were spying on me? I was reading in this corner. You didn't notice me. She finally turned to him. That's when I realized the person I'd been watching wasn't real, that you were hiding just like everyone else. And I was so angry. Angry? That you had everything, title, wealth, intelligence, and you were wasting it on being charming. She swallowed hard. That's why I called you a coward, not because I hate you, because I was disappointed. The confession sat between them, raw and painful. Adrian didn't know what to say. That she'd watched him for years. That she'd heard him drop his mask and been angry instead of intrigued. That her disappointment cut deeper than any insult. I'm sorry, he said finally. For what? For being a disappointment. You're not... She stopped, started again. You're not a disappointment. You're just lost. Like everyone else. Except you. Especially me. Lydia's laugh was bitter. I hide in work because I don't know how to be anything else. My mother died, my father retreated into his studies, and I was left trying to fix the world because I couldn't fix my own life. So yes, Adrian, I'm just as lost as you are. Adrian, not your grace. The intimacy of it made his chest ache. What a pair we make, he said softly. The blind leading the blind. Or two broken people trying to be less broken together. She looked at him then, really looked, and he saw something shift in her expression. Not love, not yet, but possibility. The faintest hint that maybe this disaster could become something real. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. I don't know how to do this, how to let someone in. We'll figure it out. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand again. 1 month, 1 day at a time. We'll make mistakes, probably huge ones, but we'll make them honestly. Honestly, she repeated, her fingers curled around his. That's going to be harder than you think. I know, but you're worth it. You don't know that yet. Then I'll find out. He squeezed her hand gently. Fair warning, I'm probably going to drive you insane. You already do. They sat like that, hands linked, watching the afternoon light play across the water. People walked past, and Adrian knew they were being watched. The Duke and his surprising fiancée having an intimate moment. By tomorrow, it would be in the papers. Let them watch. Let them talk. For the first time in his life, Adrian didn't care what they thought. Come to dinner tonight, he said, at my townhouse. Just us. No performance. Is that appropriate? Probably not. But we're engaged. We're allowed some impropriety. Lydia hesitated. What if I don't like you? The real you? Then at least we'll know. Better now than after the wedding. Adrian, I'm serious. Come to dinner. We'll talk. Really talk. And if by the end of the night you hate me, we'll end this with no hard feelings. You're giving me an escape route. I'm giving us both one, but I don't think we'll take it. Why not? He smiled. Because you're just as curious as I am. You want to know if this could be real. She stood, pulling her hand free. For a moment, he thought she'd refuse. Then she straightened her shoulders and said, 7 o'clock, and I'm not dressing up. Wouldn't dream of asking you to. She turned to leave, then paused. Adrian? Yes? Thank you for not running. Thank you for not letting me. She walked away, spine straight, steps measured. But Adrian saw the slight tremor in her shoulders and knew she was just as terrified as he was. He sat alone on the bench for a long time after she'd gone, trying to understand what he'd just committed to. A month of honesty. A month of letting someone see behind the mask. A month of being accountable to someone who wouldn't accept his usual deflections. It should have felt like a prison. Instead, it felt like the first deep breath he'd taken in years. Adrian stood and walked back to his waiting carriage. His driver looked surprised to see him smiling. Home, Your Grace? No. Adrian climbed in. Take me to my solicitor's office. I need to arrange a rather large bank transfer. If he was going to do this, really do this, he might as well start by putting his money where his mouth was. Lydia's shelter would have the funds it needed by end of business today. Then they could focus on the harder work, learning to trust each other, learning to be honest, learning to be more than the masks they'd worn for so long. The carriage rolled through London streets, and Adrian watched the city pass by. Somewhere out there, Lydia was probably panicking about dinner, probably regretting her agreement, probably trying to figure out how to protect herself from the disaster she'd set in motion. He couldn't wait to see her again. By 6:30 that evening, Adrian's staff had been shocked into near silence. He'd dismissed everyone except the cook, who'd been instructed to prepare something simple. No 7-course formal dinner, no crystal and china, just food and conversation. Your Grace, his butler had protested, entertaining a lady without proper staff. She's not a lady, she's my fiancée. And we're having a private dinner, not a state function. You're all dismissed for the evening. They'd left reluctantly, shooting worried glances at each other. Adrian knew what they were thinking. The Duke had finally lost his mind. Maybe he had. At 7:05, the knocker sounded. Adrian answered the door himself, which would have horrified his butler if he'd been there to see it. Lydia stood on the step wearing the same gray dress from earlier. No jewelry, hair still severely pulled back. She looked uncomfortable and defiant and absolutely determined. You answered your own door, she said. I dismissed the staff. That's inappropriate. I know. Come in anyway. She stepped inside, looking around the entrance hall with obvious curiosity. It's smaller than I expected. I prefer cozy to palatial. The family estate is palatial. This is human-sized. He took her cloak. Dining room is this way. He led her through the house, acutely aware of how intimate this was. No chaperone, no servants, just the two of them in his private space. The dining room table had been set for two, close together at one end. Simple food, roasted chicken, vegetables, bread. A bottle of wine, but also water and tea. You cooked? Lydia asked, surprised. I can't cook to save my life. My cook prepared everything and left it warming. I can manage serving it myself. He pulled out her chair. Sit, please. She sat, still looking uncertain. Adrian took his own seat across from her and poured wine for them both. To honesty, he said, raising his glass. To surviving it, Lydia countered. They drank. The silence stretched awkward and uncertain. This is strange, Lydia said finally. Extremely strange. I don't know what to say to you. Neither do I. We could start with the weather. The weather is fine. Riveting conversation already. Adrian set down his glass. All right, new approach. Ask me something you actually want to know. Something real. Lydia studied him. Why did you really propose to me? Not the surface reason? The real one. Adrian had expected an easier question to start. He should have known better. Because you made me angry, he said slowly. Because you saw through everything and I couldn't stand it. Because for one moment I wanted to hurt you the way you'd hurt me. By proposing marriage. By making you look ridiculous. By proving I had power over you. He met her eyes. It was cruel. And I regretted it the moment I saw your face. What did you see? Hope. The word came out rough. Just for a second, before you hit it. You looked hopeful, and I realized what I'd done. Lydia's hat tightened on her napkin. Your turn. Ask me something. Why did you accept? Because I wanted to punish you. Because I was tired of men like you treating words like toys. She paused. And because part of me, the stupid, hopeful part, wanted to believe you meant it. I'm sorry. Don't be. I knew better. I knew it was a joke and I accepted anyway because I was angry and reckless and wanted to see you squirm. She looked down at her plate. We're both guilty. Then we're both forgiven. Adrian served her food, the domesticity of it strange and right. Next question. What do you actually want from life? That's a big question. We have all night. Lydia considered while she ate. I want to matter. I want to look back at my life and know I made things better for people who had no other help. I want to build something that lasts beyond me. She met his eyes. What about you? Adrian opened his mouth to give his usual deflection, then stopped. Honesty. They'd agreed on honesty. I want to be worth something beyond my title, he said quietly. I want to wake up and feel like my life has purpose. I want to be someone my father would have been proud of instead of the disappointment he got. Your father's dead. Doesn't make it hurt less. Lydia reached across the table and took his hand. The gesture surprised them both. Tell me about him, she said, and Adrian did. He told her about a father who'd expected greatness and gotten a son who hid behind charm, about impossible standards and constant disappointment, about the relief he'd felt when his father died, immediately followed by crushing guilt. Lydia listened without interrupting, without judging. Just listened. When he finished, she squeezed his hand and said, "He was wrong about you." "You don't know that." "I do, because I've seen what you could be, and it's extraordinary." The words cracked something open in Adrian's chest. He pulled his hand back, overwhelmed. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't make me into something I'm not. I'll just disappoint you." "You already have disappointed me," Lydia said bluntly. "Multiple times, but I'm still here." They stared at each other across the table. The food was getting cold, but neither of them cared. "This is terrifying," Adrian said. "Yes. I don't know how to be this honest with someone." "Neither do I. But we're trying." She picked up her fork. "Eat. Before everything gets cold and we have to admit we're too distracted by feelings to manage basic dinner." Adrian laughed. Actually laughed, tension breaking. "You're very practical." "Someone has to be. You're busy being emotionally vulnerable." They ate in more comfortable silence. The food was good, the wine better. And somewhere between the main course and dessert, the conversation shifted from heavy confessions to lighter topics, books they'd read, places they wanted to travel, terrible parties they'd both endured. They argued about philosophy. She thought Kant was overrated. He defended him vigorously. They discovered a shared love of terrible poetry and a mutual hatred of opera. "I thought you said the soprano had exceptional lungs," Lydia teased. "She did. Doesn't mean I enjoyed listening to her shriek for 3 hours." "Then why go?" "Because it's what dukes do. We attend opera and pretend to enjoy it." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." Adrian refilled their wine glasses. "What do you do when you're not saving the world?" "I read, walk. Sometimes I paint, though I'm terrible at it." "I want to see." "Absolutely not. They're awful." "Then they'll fit right in with my terrible poetry attempts. We can have a gallery of mediocrity." Lydia smiled. A real smile this time, not the careful ones she used in public. "You write poetry?" "Badly. Very badly. But it helps me think." "Read me something." "Not a chance." "Coward." "Absolutely. Some vulnerabilities are too much for a first real dinner." She laughed, and the sound filled his dining room like light. They talked until the candles burned low and the wine bottle was empty, until the clock struck 10 and Lydia realized how late it was. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "You should." Adrian didn't move. "But I don't want you to." "We agreed on honesty, not propriety." "We agreed on a lot of things tonight." He stood, offered his hand. "Come on. I'll walk you out." At the door, wrapped in her cloak, Lydia hesitated. "Thank you for tonight. Thank you for giving me a chance I don't deserve." "You deserve more than you think." She started to leave, then turned back. "Adrian?" "Yes?" "I'm glad you didn't run." "I'm glad you didn't let me." She smiled once more, then stepped out into the night. Adrian watched her climb into the carriage he'd arranged, watched it roll away into the darkness. Then he closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. One dinner, one night of honesty, and he was already in far deeper than he'd ever intended. This was either the best decision of his life or the most catastrophic. He was terrified to find out which. The letter arrived at breakfast, delivered by a grim-faced messenger who refused to wait for a reply. Adrian broke the seal and felt his stomach drop. "Your Grace, it has come to my attention that you have formed an attachment to Miss Lydia Hale. While I congratulate you on your impending nuptials, I feel compelled to inform you of certain facts regarding your fiancé's character and activities. Miss Hale's charitable work is a front for far more radical pursuits. She has been harboring women who have fled their lawful husbands, encouraging them to abandon their marital duties and seek separation, a clear violation of moral and legal codes. Furthermore, she has been corresponding with known agitators advocating for women's suffrage and property rights. I have compiled substantial evidence of these activities, which I will be happy to share with the Times unless you reconsider this unfortunate alliance. A man of your station cannot afford to be associated with such scandal. Your decision will reflect not only on yourself, but on the integrity of your title and family name. I remain respectfully, Lord Edmund Carlyle. Adrian read it twice, rage building with each word. Carlyle. The same bastard who'd cut funding to Lydia's shelter because his morals wouldn't allow helping women who'd left abusive marriages. He was trying to blackmail Adrian into ending the engagement. The clock showed 8:30. Lydia would be at the shelter by now, probably already working herself to exhaustion. Adrian grabbed his coat and headed for the door. "Your Grace," his butler called after him, "your mother is expected at 10. Cancel it. Tell her I'll call tomorrow." He took his horse instead of the carriage, riding hard through London's morning streets until he reached the narrow building in Southwark that housed Lydia's shelter. The neighborhood was rough, crumbling tenements, unwashed children playing in gutters, the smell of industrial smoke mixing with human desperation. Adrian had never been here before. He'd sent the money, but he'd never actually seen where it went. The guilt hit him immediately. He tied his horse and knocked. A tired-looking woman with a baby on her hip answered, took one look at his expensive clothes, and tried to close the door. "Wait, I'm looking for Miss Hale. She don't see fancy men." "I'm her fiancé." The woman's eyes widened. "The Duke?" "Yes. Is she here?" "Back room, but she's with someone." Adrian was already pushing past. The interior was clean but sparse. Bare floors, simple furniture, everything functional. He heard voices down a narrow hallway and followed them to a closed door. "Can't go back," a woman was saying, voice thick with tears. "He'll kill me this time. I know he will." "You're safe here." Lydia's voice, calm and steady. "He doesn't know where you are. And even if he finds out, he can't get to you." "But the law protects you too. We'll find a solicitor. Get a separation order if we can." "With what money? I've got nothing. He took everything." The door opened before Adrian could knock. Lydia stood there, eyes flashing with anger when she saw him. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk. Now." "I'm busy. It's urgent." He kept his voice low, but she must have heard something in it because her expression shifted from anger to concern. "Wait here," she told the woman inside. Young, bruised face half hidden behind lank hair. Then she stepped into the hall and closed the door. "What's happened?" Adrian pulled out Carlyle's letter and handed it to her. He watched her face as she read, watched the color drain from her cheeks, watched her hands start to shake before she steadied them through sheer force of will. "When did this arrive?" "This morning. And you came straight here." "I needed to warn you. He's going to the papers, Lydia. He's going to destroy your reputation and mine if I don't end the engagement." She folded the letter carefully. "Then end it." "What?" "End the engagement. I won't let you sacrifice your position for me." Her voice was steady, but her eyes were desperate. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. This is why people like me don't marry people like you." "People like you?" Adrian felt his own anger rising. "You mean people who actually give a damn about something beyond their own comfort? People who have enemies? People whose work makes powerful men uncomfortable?" She thrust the letter back at him. "I'm not worth this, Adrian. I'm not worth losing everything. You don't get to decide what I'm willing to lose." "Yes, I do. This affects me too." Her voice rose. Down the hall, someone poked their head out, then quickly retreated. Lydia lowered her voice to a harsh whisper. "If you fight this, Carlyle will drag every woman in this building through the mud. He'll paint them as adulteresses and abandoners. He'll make helping them look like a crime. I can't let that happen." "So you're just going to surrender? Let him win?" "I'm going to protect the people who depend on me." Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "This isn't about pride, Adrian. This is about 16 women who have nowhere else to go. If Carlyle publishes his evidence, donations will stop. Other benefactors will pull out. The shelter will close and these women will be back on the streets. Or married to men who beat them." "Yes! So you see why I have to fight." Adrian grabbed her shoulders. "You have to fight with me. You're not listening. No, you're not listening. Carlyle is betting we'll run, that we'll fold under pressure because that's what people like us do. Protect ourselves and let everyone else suffer. He forced her to meet his eyes. But what if we don't? What if we call his bluff? It's not a bluff. He has evidence. Evidence that you help women leave abusive marriages. Evidence that you believe women should have rights. So what? Adrian released her, pacing the narrow hallway. He's counting on that being scandalous enough to destroy us. But what if we own it? What if we make it public ourselves, on our own terms? Lydia stared at him. That's insane. That's strategy. If we let Carlyle control the narrative, we lose. But if we tell the story first, if we make it about protecting vulnerable women instead of radical activities, we take away his weapon. And your reputation will survive, or it won't. Either way, I'll still be a duke and I'll still have money and influence. He stopped pacing. But those women in there, they have nothing except this shelter, except you. I'm not letting Carlyle take that away because he's a miserable bastard who enjoys hurting people. This could destroy you. Then I'll be destroyed standing up for something that matters instead of destroyed running away from it. He moved closer. You told me I needed purpose. Well, here it is. Fight with me, Lydia, please. She was crying now, silently, tears tracking down her face. I don't know how. Neither do I, but we'll figure it out. He wiped her tears with his thumb, the gesture tender and devastating. Together. That was the deal, remember? 1 month. Honest, no running. This is different. This is exactly what we agreed to. The first real test of whether we can trust each other. He cupped her face in his hands. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. And I'm not letting you push me away to protect me. We're in this together now. Lydia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. When she opened them again, something had shifted. Resolve, maybe. Or desperation. Hard to tell which. If we do this, she said slowly, we do it properly. No half measures. We tell the full truth about what happens to these women, why they're here, what their husbands did. Agreed. And we name names. Every man who beat his wife badly enough that she fled. Every family that covered it up. Every authority who looked the other way. Adrian felt a chill of fear and exhilaration. That's dangerous. That's justice. If we're going to burn, we might as well burn bright enough to light the way for others. She was magnificent like this, fierce and uncompromising and absolutely terrifying. Adrian wondered if he'd ever actually seen her before this moment. All right, he said, we burn together. How do we start? Lydia pulled away, wiping her face roughly. We need allies. Journalists who will print the truth instead of Carlyle's version. Members of Parliament who support legal protections for married women. Anyone with influence who might stand with us. I know some journalists, and my uncle sits in the Lords. He's always complaining about antiquated marriage laws. Will he help? If I ask, he owes me a favor. Adrian thought rapidly. We'll need testimonials, women willing to speak publicly about why they left. Most are too afraid. Then we find the ones who aren't. Just 1 or 2, enough to put faces to the story. He was pacing again, mind racing. And we host the fundraiser anyway, make it impossible to ignore, invite everyone who matters and dare them to condemn us to our faces. That's bold. That's necessary. Carlyle thinks we'll hide. We do the opposite. We make this the biggest social event of the season and force people to choose sides. Lydia was nodding slowly. It could work, or it could be a complete disaster. Probably both. Adrian smiled grimly. When should we do it? 2 weeks. Gives us time to prepare, but not so much time that Carlyle can outmaneuver us. 2 weeks. He held out his hand. Partners? She took it. Partners. They sealed it with a handshake that felt more binding than any wedding vow. The door behind them opened. The young woman with the bruised face peered out nervously. Miss Hale? Is Everything's fine, Mary. Lydia's voice gentled immediately. This is Adrian, my fiancé. He's going to help. Mary looked between them doubtfully. Help how? By making sure your husband and every other man like him faces consequences for what they've done. Adrian said it simply, directly. Would you be willing to tell your story, publicly? Mary's eyes went wide with fear. He'd kill me. He'd have to go through me first. Adrian wasn't joking. And I'm a duke with significant resources, including lawyers, guards, and enough money to make sure you're protected. Why would you do that? Because someone should have done it already. He looked at Lydia. Because hiding the truth only protects the guilty. And because I'm tired of being useless. Mary studied him for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she nodded. All right, I'll tell. Lydia made a small sound, relief or fear or both. Mary, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Mary touched her bruised face gingerly. If it can help someone else avoid this? Yes, I'll tell. Adrian felt something settle in his chest. Purpose. Real, terrifying, undeniable purpose. Then we start now, he said. The next 2 weeks were chaos. Adrian used every connection he'd ever made, calling in favors he'd been owed and burning bridges with people who refused to help. His uncle, Lord Pemberton, agreed to sponsor a bill in the Lords protecting women's right to seek legal separation in cases of violence. It would fail. They all knew it would fail. But it would start the conversation. 3 journalists agreed to attend the fundraiser and print honest coverage. 2 refused, calling the whole endeavor unseemly. 1 threatened to publish a hit piece. Adrian threatened him right back with information about the man's gambling debts. The journalist backed down. Lydia worked with those women at the shelter, carefully identifying those willing to share their stories. Mary was the first. 2 others followed, older women who'd lost everything but found their voices again. Their testimonials were heartbreaking. Adrian listened to each one and felt his anger grow cold and focused. They sent invitations to the fundraiser. Half came back declined with terse notes about prior commitments. The other half accepted, probably out of morbid curiosity to see the scandal unfold in person. And through it all, Carlyle was silent. Too silent. He's planning something, Lydia said one night. They were in Adrian's study, surrounded by papers and half-drunk tea, going over the final details. He's too quiet. Let him plan. Adrian didn't look up from the speech he was writing. We're ready. Are we? She sounded exhausted. They'd barely slept in days, both working themselves to the point of collapse. Adrian, if this goes wrong, it won't. You can't know that. No, but I know we're doing the right thing. That has to be enough. Lydia came around the desk and took the papers from his hands. Look at me. He did. She looked terrible. Dark circles under her eyes, hair escaping its pins, dress wrinkled from being worn too many hours. She'd never looked more beautiful to him. I need you to understand something, she said quietly. After tomorrow night, everything changes. Win or lose, there's no going back. Your life will never be what it was. Good. What it was wasn't worth keeping. You say that now. I say that because it's true. He stood, taking her hands. Lydia, for the first time in my life, I wake up and know what I'm doing matters. I know why I'm getting out of bed. And it's because of you. Because you showed me what it means to fight for something real. This isn't what I wanted. Yes, it is. You wanted me to stop wasting myself. Well, I'm not wasting myself anymore. I'm using everything I have, title, money, connections, for something that actually helps people. Isn't that what you said I should do? She was crying again. She'd been crying a lot lately, though she tried to hide it. I didn't want you to lose everything for it. I'm not losing everything. I'm gaining something better. He kissed her forehead gently. Purpose. Partnership. You. You don't have me. Not really. We're still just what? Pretending? He laughed softly. Lydia, I stopped pretending 2 weeks ago. Maybe you haven't noticed because we've been too busy fighting the world, but I'm in love with you. The words fell into the silence like stones into deep water. Lydia froze. What? I'm in love with you. He said it again, clearer. I don't know when it happened. Maybe when you called me a coward. Maybe when you accepted my stupid proposal. Maybe when you looked at me in the garden and decided to give me a chance I didn't deserve. But it happened, and I'm done pretending it didn't. Adrian, you don't have to say it back. I'm not asking you to. I just need you to know. He cupped her face in his hands. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever Carlyle does, however this ends, I'm with you. Not because of honor or promises or any of that. Because I choose you every day. I choose you. Lydia was shaking. This is the worst possible timing. I know. We're about to walk into a room full of people who want to destroy us. I know. And you choose now to tell me you love me? When else would I say it? When it's safe. He smiled slightly. You told me to be honest. This is me being honest. She stood on her toes and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce, and full of all the fear and hope they'd both been carrying. Adrian pulled her closer, pouring everything he couldn't say into that kiss. All his terror, all his determination, all his reckless, stupid love. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lydia rested her forehead against his. I don't know if I love you, she whispered. I don't know if what I feel is love or gratitude or just desperation, but I know I don't want to lose you. I know I wake up thinking about you and go to sleep worrying about you. I know the thought of you getting hurt because of me makes me want to die. That's a start. Is it enough? It's more than enough. He kissed her again, softer this time. We'll figure out the rest, together. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the lamplight, trying to pretend tomorrow wasn't coming. But tomorrow came anyway. The fundraiser was held at Ashworth House, the same ballroom where Adrian had proposed. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. People arrived curious and wary, filling the space with whispered speculation. Adrian stood near the entrance with Lydia on his arm, greeting guests with a calm he didn't feel. She wore green again, the same color from that first night, but a finer dress this time, one he'd bought her when she'd protested she had nothing appropriate. Stop fidgeting, she murmured. I'm not fidgeting. You're tapping your foot. It's distracting. He stopped. Nervous? Terrified. But she smiled at Lady Pemberton as the old woman approached. How lovely to see you. Miss Hale, Your Grace. Lady Pemberton's eyes were sharp. Quite the gathering. One might almost think you're courting controversy. One would be correct, Adrian said smoothly. We believe in transparency. She moved on, leaving perfume and judgment in her wake. More guests arrived. Some friendly, most neutral, a few openly hostile. Adrian tracked each one, noting who might be swayed and who was already lost. At 8 o'clock, when the room was full and the murmuring had reached a fever pitch, Adrian took the small stage at the front of the ballroom. The crowd quieted. Thank you all for coming, he began. His voice was steady. I know there have been questions about my engagement to Miss Hale, about her work, about her character. Tonight I intend to answer those questions. Silence. Absolute attention. 2 weeks ago I received a letter. He pulled it from his pocket. In it, Lord Carlisle threatened to expose Miss Hale's charitable work as something scandalous, something shameful. He suggested I end our engagement to preserve my reputation. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Carlisle himself stood near the back, his face red with anger. I declined, Adrian continued, because what Lord Carlisle calls scandal, I call justice. What he calls radical, I call necessary. Miss Hale runs a shelter for women fleeing violent marriages, women whose husbands have beaten them, brutalized them, nearly killed them. More gasps. Someone made a sound of protest. This makes some of you uncomfortable. I understand. It's easier to pretend these things don't happen. Easier to believe marriage is sacred and wives should endure in silence. He looked directly at Carlisle. But silence protects the guilty, and I'm done being silent. This is outrageous, Carlisle shouted. You have no right. I have every right, and so do the women you'd condemn. Adrian gestured to the side of the room. Mary, would you join me? Mary stepped forward, visibly shaking. Lydia moved to her other side, supporting her. Mary was married at 17, Adrian said. Her husband beat her for 3 years, broke her ribs, blacked her eyes, knocked out 2 of her teeth. When she finally fled to Miss Hale's shelter, she weighed less than 90 pounds. The room was deathly silent now. Mary lifted her chin. It's true. All of it. And I'm not ashamed anymore. Her voice trembled, but held. My husband was a gentleman, respected. No one believed me when I tried to tell them, so I stopped trying, until Miss Hale gave me somewhere safe to go. You abandoned your marriage, someone shouted. I saved my life, Mary shot back. Adrian let the moment breathe. Let the discomfort settle. Then he continued. Lord Carlisle would have you believe that helping women like Mary is scandalous, that fighting for legal protections for abused wives is radical. I disagree. I think the scandal is that we've tolerated this violence for so long. I think the scandal is that men can brutalize their wives with impunity while we all look the other way. Hear, hear, someone called. Adrian looked and saw his uncle, Lord Pemberton, nodding approval. But others were shaking their heads, muttering. The crowd was split. Adrian could see it, half appalled at his boldness, half moved by Mary's testimony. Tonight, we're raising funds for Miss Hale's shelter, he said, and we're starting a legal fund to help women seek separation and protection. If you believe this work matters, if you believe women deserve safety, I ask you to contribute. If you don't, he smiled coldly. Well, there's the door. No one moved. Then Lady Pemberton stood. I'll contribute £500. 1,000, Lord Pemberton added. More voices, some angry, some supportive. The room erupted into argument, and Adrian felt both triumph and terror. They'd done it. They'd forced the conversation, but they'd also made enemies. Carlyle was pushing through the crowd toward the stage, his face purple with rage. You've destroyed yourself, Veermont. You and that whore! Adrian punched him. The blow connected with Carlyle's jaw and sent the older man sprawling. The room went silent again, shocked. Call her that again, Adrian said quietly, and I'll kill you. Carlyle scrambled up, backing away. You're finished, both of you. I'll see you ruined. Try it. Adrian's voice was ice. I have lawyers, money, influence, and now I have witnesses who heard you call my fiancée a whore in public. So go ahead, Carlyle. Try to ruin me. See what happens. Carlyle stared at him, then turned and fled. The ballroom erupted. Half the guests were leaving in outrage. The other half were crowding forward to pledge donations or offer support. Adrian couldn't tell if they'd won or lost. Lydia grabbed his arm. Adrian, your hand! He looked down. His knuckles were bloody. He hadn't felt it. It's fine. It's not fine. You hit a lord. He deserved worse. Adrian turned to face her. Are you all right? Am I? She laughed, slightly hysterical. You just punched a man for me, in front of everyone. Yes, and? And I think I love you. The words hit him harder than his punch had hit Carlyle. What? I think I love you. She said it louder this time. I'm terrified and exhilarated and furious and so in love with you that I can't breathe. Adrian kissed her. Right there, in front of everyone still remaining. Let them see. Let them talk. When they broke apart, Lydia was crying and laughing at the same time. We're going to pay for this, she said. I know. Society will never forgive us. I don't care. Your reputation is worth less than you are. He held her close. Whatever happens now, we face it together. She nodded against his chest. Together. But even as they stood there, wrapped in each other, Adrian saw the faces of those who'd left, saw the disgust, the judgment, the absolute certainty that they'd committed social suicide. They'd won the battle. But the war was just beginning. The morning papers were merciless. Duke defends radicals screamed one headline. Veermont's fall from grace announced another. The most brutal, titled Fool Chooses Scandal Over Sense. Adrian read them over breakfast, each word a small cut. Beside him, Lydia sat pale and silent. We knew this would happen, he said. Knowing and experiencing are different things. The door burst open. Adrian's butler stood there, looking panicked. Your Grace, your mother, the Dowager Duchess. Veermont swept in like a winter storm. She was 60, iron gray, and absolutely terrifying when angry. She was very angry. Out, she told Lydia. Mother, I said out. I need to speak with my son. Alone. Lydia stood, but Adrian caught her hand. Whatever you say to me, you say in front of her. His mother's eyes narrowed. You've lost your mind. Possibly, but my mind is mine to lose. You punched a lord, in public, over a woman of no consequence. Watch yourself, Adrian said softly. His mother stared at him like she'd never seen him before. What has she done to you? She woke me up. He stood, still holding Lydia's hand. I'm sorry if my actions embarrass you, but I'm not sorry I took them, and I'm not ending my engagement. You'll be ruined. Then I'll be ruined. But I'll be ruined standing up for something I believe in instead of sitting quietly while good people suffer. This is about more than you. I know. It's about every woman who's been beaten by her husband and told she should endure it. It's about every victim who's been silenced because the truth makes people uncomfortable. It's about choosing principle over comfort. He squeezed Lydia's hand. I'm done being comfortable. His mother looked between them. You love her? Yes. Enough to throw away everything? I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing what matters. Silence stretched. Then, incredibly, his mother sighed. You're just like your father, she said. Stubborn, idealistic, impossible. I thought you said I disappointed him. You did, because you refused to use your gifts. She moved closer. But this? Fighting for something? This he would have understood. Adrian felt his throat tighten. Mother, I don't agree with your methods, and I think you're courting disaster. She looked at Lydia. But I won't abandon my son, even when he's being an idiot. Thank you, Lydia said quietly. Don't thank me yet. The dowager's smile was sharp. If you're going to fight, fight smart. I have connections you haven't considered, and I'm very good at making life difficult for people I dislike. Adrian stared at his mother. You're going to help us? I'm going to help you not destroy yourself completely. She pulled on her gloves. Now, who else have you alienated, and how do we fix it? They spent the next hour strategizing. The dowager knew things Adrian didn't, which families had daughters in similar situations, which lords secretly supported reform, which journalists could be swayed with the right pressure. Carlisle's biggest donor is Lord Whitmore, she said. His daughter left her husband last year, quietly. The family paid the man off to avoid scandal. Remind Whitmore of that. He'll pull Carlisle's funding. That's blackmail, Lydia said. That's strategy. The dowager smiled. Learn the difference. By the time she left, Adrian felt like they might actually survive this. But that night, everything changed. The fire started just after midnight. Adrian woke to pounding on his door and his butler shouting about smoke. He threw on clothes and ran downstairs to find half his staff in the street, pointing at the shelter. Lydia's shelter. It was burning. Flames poured from the windows. Smoke billowed black against the night sky. Adrian heard screaming, women trapped inside, unable to get out. He ran. Your Grace, no! He ignored the shouts, ignored the heat, ignored everything except the women inside. The front door was blocked by flames, but the side entrance was clear. He kicked it open and plunged into smoke so thick he couldn't see. Anyone here? Coughing, crying. He followed the sounds. 4 women huddled in the back room, trapped by fire on all sides. Mary was one of them, clutching a baby. Come on! Adrian grabbed them, pulling them toward the door. The smoke was choking him. His eyes streamed. Heat seared his skin. They made it out just as part of the ceiling collapsed behind them. Adrian stumbled into the street, coughing violently. Someone wrapped him in a blanket. Someone else was shouting for a doctor. Lydia, he gasped. Where? Here. She appeared, face streaked with soot, eyes wild with terror. You idiot! You could have died. So could they. She hit him. Actually hit him, right in the chest. Then she was sobbing against him, holding him so tight he could barely breathe. Don't ever do that again. Can't promise that. Behind them, the shelter burned. By the time the fire brigade arrived, there was nothing left to save. Adrian watched it burn and felt cold fury settle in his chest. Carlisle, he said, you don't know that. Who else? He turned to face her. He did this. To punish us. To destroy what you built. Lydia looked at the ruins of her life's work, and something in her eyes went hard and cold. Then we destroy him back. The crash came at breakfast 3 days later. Adrian was reading the morning papers, a habit he'd developed since the engagement, morbidly curious about what society was saying, when Pemberton burst into his dining room without announcement. Your Grace, we have a problem. Adrian looked up from his eggs. Good morning to you, too. Lord Blackwood is hosting a dinner tonight. He's invited everyone who matters in London. Pemberton set down a cream-colored invitation. And he's made it very clear he intends to publicly question Miss Hale's suitability as your future Duchess. The fork paused halfway to Adrian's mouth. He what? Apparently he's been gathering ammunition. Her work with the shelter, her outspoken views on social reform, her family's modest status. He plans to humiliate her in front of the entire peerage. Pemberton's face was grim. And you, by extension, for choosing her. Adrian set down his fork carefully, very carefully, because if he didn't, he might throw it. Why? Does it matter? Blackwood's a pompous ass who thinks bloodlines matter more than character. He's been opposed to your engagement since it was announced. No. Adrian stood. Why does he care enough to orchestrate this? What does he gain? Pemberton hesitated. His daughter, Elizabeth. He's been positioning her as a potential match for you for 2 years. Elizabeth Blackwood is 17 and terrified of her own shadow. She's also from one of the oldest families in England. In Blackwood's mind, she's the appropriate choice. Miss Hale is not. Pemberton pulled out a folded paper. I have it on good authority he's planning to question her charity work as inappropriate for a woman of rank. He'll suggest it's unbecoming, perhaps even scandalous. The shelter helps women escape violence. He'll frame it as interfering in private family matters, as encouraging wives to abandon their husbands. Pemberton's voice was tight with barely controlled anger. He's going to paint her as a radical who'll damage your reputation and influence. Adrian felt ice settle in his stomach. When did you learn this? An hour ago. I came as soon as I could. Has anyone warned Lydia? I sent a message to her home, no response yet. Adrian was already moving, grabbing his coat. I'm going to her. Your Grace, Pemberton, if you're about to tell me to let this play out, save your breath. I was going to say you should prepare for war. Pemberton's expression was fierce. Because if you defend her publicly against Blackwood, you're choosing her over every social convention we have. The consequences... I don't care about consequences, not anymore. Adrian headed for the door. Send word to everyone we know. Tell them we'll be at Blackwood's dinner tonight, and that anyone who values my friendship will think very carefully before joining his attack. He was out the door before Pemberton could respond. The carriage ride to Lydia's home felt interminable. Adrian's mind raced through possibilities, strategies, ways to protect her from what was coming. Blackwood was influential, well-connected, and vicious when he wanted to be. A public attack from him could shred Lydia's reputation beyond repair, and it would be Adrian's fault for proposing, for dragging her into his world, for making her a target. He found her in the small drawing room of her father's modest townhouse, surrounded by ledgers and correspondence. She looked up when he entered, surprise flickering across her face. Adrian, what are you... We have a problem. He crossed to her, taking her hands. They were ink-stained. Lord Blackwood is planning to humiliate you tonight at his dinner. Her face went carefully blank. I see. Did you get Pemberton's message? I've been working since dawn. I haven't checked. She pulled her hands free gently. What exactly is he planning? Adrian told her everything, watched her face remain composed even as he detailed the attack being prepared. When he finished, she stood and walked to the window. I shouldn't go, she said quietly. The hell you won't. Adrian, he's right about some of it. I'm not from the right family. My work is controversial. I will damage your standing. I don't care about my standing. You should. She turned to face him. You have responsibilities, people who depend on you. You can't just throw all that away because... Because what? Because I care about you? The words came out rougher than intended. Because in 2 weeks you've made me give a damn about something beyond my own comfort? Because I'd rather burn every bridge in London than stand by while they tear you apart. Lydia stared at him. You care about me, obviously. He crossed to her. Did you think I was doing all this, the dinners, the conversations, the honesty, for fun? I thought you were trying. I didn't realize... She trailed off, something vulnerable crossing her face. I didn't realize it had become real for you. It's been real since that first night, since you walked away. And I followed you like an idiot. He took her shoulders gently. Lydia, I know we agreed to take this slow, to figure things out. But Blackwood's forcing my hand. I need you to know that I'm not walking away from this. From you. Not for him, not for society, not for anyone. Even if it costs you everything? Especially then. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. You mean that? I do. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I'm terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm not letting him destroy you to prove some point about bloodlines. What are you going to do? I'm going to that dinner, and I'm going to make it very clear that attacking you means attacking me. He smiled grimly. Let's see how brave Blackwood is when he's facing actual consequences. Adrian, no. Listen to me. His hands tightened on her shoulders. For once in my life, I'm going to stand for something. I'm going to use every ounce of privilege and power I have to protect someone who matters. And if London decides that makes me unsuitable to be a duke, then maybe I was never suitable in the first place. Lydia's eyes were wet. This is insane. I know, but you made me brave. He pulled her closer. Or stupid. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. She laughed, watery and real. I vote stupid. Probably accurate. He rested his forehead against hers. Will you come with me tonight? Let me stand beside you when Blackwood makes his move. You're sure? Never been more sure of anything. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Then yes, I'll come. Good. He kissed her forehead, quick and impulsive. Now show me these ledgers. If I'm going to war for your shelter, I should at least understand what we're protecting. They spent the next 3 hours reviewing finances, discussing the women currently in residence, planning expansions. Adrian took notes, asked questions, and felt something settle in his chest that he'd never felt before. Purpose. This mattered. She mattered. And tonight he'd prove it. By the time evening arrived, Adrian had transformed his fear into strategy. He dressed carefully, full formal attire, every inch the Duke. If Blackwood wanted to question his judgment, Adrian would remind everyone exactly who held more power in this equation. He collected Lydia at 7. She wore deep blue, simple but elegant, her hair styled more softly than usual. She looked beautiful and terrified. Ready? He asked as she climbed into the carriage. No, but I'm coming anyway. He took her hand. Whatever happens tonight, we face it together. Together, she repeated. Her fingers tightened on his. The Blackwood residence blazed with light. Carriages lined the street, disgorging London's elite in their finest clothes. Adrian felt Lydia tense beside him as they approached. Breathe, he murmured. Remember, you're brilliant and accomplished and worth 10 of anyone in that room. Including you? Especially me. She almost smiled. They entered together, Adrian's hand at the small of her back. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Everyone knew why they were here. Everyone knew what was coming. Lord Blackwood himself greeted them in the entrance hall. He was 60, silver-haired, with eyes like chips of ice. Your Grace, Miss Hale, how delightful you could join us. Wouldn't miss it, Adrian said pleasantly. I hear you've prepared quite the evening. Blackwood's smile didn't reach his eyes. Simply a gathering of friends, good conversation, honest discussion. Honest, Adrian matched his smile. My favorite. They were shown to the drawing room where pre-dinner drinks were being served. Adrian recognized most of the faces, peers he'd known for years, women who'd angled for his attention, men who'd underestimated him at every turn. Lord Thornhill appeared at his elbow, already half drunk. Viremont, bold of you to come. Why wouldn't I? Because Blackwood's been sharpening knives all week. Word is he's going to eviscerate your little fiancé over dessert. Is that what word says? Adrian's voice was mild, but something in it made Thornhill step back. Just warning you, old friend. Appreciate it. Adrian turned to Lydia, raising his voice slightly. Darling, Lord Thornhill was just expressing concern about tonight's conversation. Isn't that thoughtful? Every person within earshot went still. Lydia understood immediately. Very thoughtful, though I can't imagine what there is to be concerned about, unless someone plans to behave inappropriately. Surely not, Adrian said. This is London high society. We're all far too civilized for anything inappropriate. The sarcasm was thick enough to cut. Several people looked away. Thornhill mumbled an excuse and fled. Subtle, Lydia murmured when they were alone again. I'm done with subtle. Subtle is what got us here. Dinner was announced. They filed into the dining room, a massive space with a table that could seat 40. Adrian maneuvered them to seats in the middle, where everyone could see them, where running would be impossible. The first courses passed in strained conversation. Adrian kept up a steady stream of charm, drawing Lydia into discussions, making sure everyone saw how comfortable they were together. How right. Then came the meat course, and Blackwood made his move. Your Grace, he said from the head of the table, his voice carrying. I've been curious about your engagement. It was so Sudden. The best things usually are, Adrian replied. Indeed, though some might say precipitous. After all, you and Miss Hale barely knew each other before the announcement. We knew each other well enough. Did you? Blackwood smiled. Tell me, Miss Hale, what exactly attracted you to his grace? Was it his title, his wealth, his influence? The room went silent. Forks paused midway to mouths. Lydia set down her wineglass with perfect composure. His intelligence, actually, and his potential to be something more than decorative. Several people choked on their food. How refreshing, Blackwood said. A woman who values intellect over breeding. I value both, Lydia said calmly, but I prefer a mind that thinks over a lineage that coasts. And your work, Miss Hale. This shelter you run, quite unusual for a woman of your position? I'm not sure what you mean by my position, Lord Blackwood. A woman about to become a duchess. Surely such charitable work is beneath your new station. Adrian felt rage building in his chest, but Lydia squeezed his hand under the table, warning him to wait. I disagree, she said. I think a duchess has the perfect position to make real change. Power without purpose is just waste. But the nature of your work, helping women leave their husbands, some might call that encouraging the dissolution of the family unit. Some might call it saving lives. Lydia's voice remained steady. The women in my shelter aren't leaving because they're bored or ungrateful. They're leaving because they're being beaten, raped, threatened. Should I turn them away to preserve some abstract concept of family unity? The bluntness shocked the table into silence. Miss Hale, Lady Pemberton interjected nervously, perhaps such graphic language isn't appropriate for what? Lydia turned to her. For dinner conversation? You're right. Violence against women should stay hidden. We should discuss it in whispers, if at all. That way we can all pretend it doesn't happen. This is exactly what I meant, Blackwood said triumphantly. Miss Hale has radical views that are unsuitable for a woman of rank. Your Grace, surely you see the problem with aligning yourself with someone who will damage your reputation and standing. Adrian had heard enough. He stood. The scrape of his chair was loud in the silence. Lord Blackwood, he said quietly, I want to make something very clear. Every eye fixed on him. Miss Hale is brilliant, compassionate, and braver than anyone in this room. She spent years doing work that actually matters while the rest of us attend parties and congratulate ourselves for being born into the right families. He looked around the table, meeting eyes. She's accomplished more in 5 years than most of us will in our entire lives. And if that makes her unsuitable in your eyes, then your eyes are the problem, not her. Your Grace, I'm not finished. Adrian's voice cut like steel. You invited us here tonight to humiliate her, to question her worth, to convince me I've made a mistake. He turned to Blackwood. But the only mistake I see is that I've wasted 28 years caring what people like you think. How dare you? No, how dare you? Adrian leaned forward, hands flat on the table. Miss Hale saves lives. What do you do, Blackwood, besides judge people and protect your precious social order? When's the last time you actually helped someone who couldn't help you back? Blackwood's face was purple. I will not be spoken to this way. Then perhaps you shouldn't have attacked my fiancé. Adrian straightened. Here's what's going to happen. Anyone in this room who values my friendship, my actual friendship, not just access to my title, will think very carefully about how they treat Miss Hale from this moment forward. Because an attack on her is an attack on me. And I promise you, I can make things very uncomfortable for people who cross me. You're threatening us, Lord Westbrook sputtered. I'm clarifying positions. Adrian's smile was cold. I have wealth, influence, and connections you've all spent years cultivating. I can make or break social standing with a word. And I've never bothered to use that power before because I was too lazy and too comfortable. He looked at Lydia, who was staring at him with something like awe. But I'm not comfortable anymore. I'm angry. And I'm done pretending that people like you deserve respect simply because you were born into it. The silence was absolute. Then Lady Ashworth, quiet, nervous Lady Ashworth, cleared her throat. I think Miss Hale is perfectly suitable, she said. Her voice shook but held. More than suitable. I've worked with her on several charity efforts. She's dedicated and effective. I'd be honored to call her a duchess. Adrian felt something shift in the room. As would I, another voice chimed in. Lord Pemberton's wife. The work she does is extraordinary. She's been nothing but gracious to me, Caroline Hart added, surprising everyone, including herself. One by one, voices rose. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to make it clear that Blackwood had miscalculated, that Adrian's defense had given others permission to speak up. Blackwood's face was white with fury. "This is my home, and we're grateful for your hospitality," Adrian interrupted smoothly. "But I think Miss Hale and I have had enough dinner conversation for one evening. We'll be taking our leave." He offered Lydia his arm. She took it, rising with perfect grace despite the tremor he could feel running through her. They walked out together, through the dining room, past the shocked servants, into the entrance hall. Behind them, the room erupted into frantic conversation. The front door closed, cutting off the noise. In the sudden quiet, Lydia turned to him. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You defended me." "Of course I did. You stood up to everyone. You threatened your own social standing." "I meant every word." "Adrian," her voice broke. "No one's ever done that for me before." He pulled her close, right there in Blackwood's entrance hall where anyone could see. "Get used to it, because I plan to keep doing it. Anyone who comes after you goes through me first." She buried her face in his chest. He felt her shoulders shake and held her tighter. "I'm going to ruin you," she whispered. "Good. I was boring before you." She laughed through tears. "We should go." "Probably, before Blackwood recovers enough to throw us out bodily." They made it to the carriage before the tears really came. Lydia collapsed against him, crying with what sounded like relief and shock and something deeper. Adrian held her, smoothing her hair, murmuring nonsense reassurances. "You were magnificent," he said when she'd calmed enough to listen. "You didn't flinch, didn't apologize. You stood your ground." "I was terrified. So was I. But we did it together." She pulled back enough to look at him. Her face was blotchy from crying, her carefully styled hair coming loose. She'd never looked more beautiful. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now? Now half of London thinks I've lost my mind, and the other half is reconsidering whether they've been wrong about what makes someone worthy of respect." He smiled. "We've made enemies, but we've made allies too. Was it worth it? Ask me in a week." She almost smiled. "Adrian?" "Yes? Thank you for fighting for me, for choosing me over them." "Always." He meant it. "From now on, it's always you." She kissed him then, quick and impulsive and tasting of salt from her tears. When she pulled back, she looked surprised at herself. "Sorry, that was perfect." He touched her face. "Absolutely perfect." They rode home in silence, but it was comfortable now. Adrian walked her to her door, waiting while she found her key. "Tomorrow," she said, "we're going to wake up to a scandal." "Probably. Your mother is going to hear about this." "Definitely." "Are you ready for that?" "Not even slightly," he grinned. "But I've survived worse." "Have you?" "No, but I'm willing to try." She stood on her toes and kissed him again, slower this time. When she pulled away, her eyes were soft. "Good night, Adrian?" "Good night, Lydia." He waited until she was safely inside before returning to his carriage. His mind was already racing ahead to tomorrow, the letters he'd need to write, the people he'd need to speak with. The damage control, or damage acceleration, required. But underneath the planning, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Pride. He'd stood for something, fought for someone, used his power for more than comfort and convenience, and it had felt better than anything he'd done in his entire life. The next morning brought exactly the chaos Lydia had predicted. Adrian's breakfast table was covered in letters, some congratulatory, some horrified, most confused. His mother's occupied an entire page of overwrought script demanding he explain himself immediately. He was composing a response when Pemberton arrived again, this time looking cautiously pleased. "Your Grace, I bring interesting news. Good interesting or bad interesting? Depends on your perspective." Pemberton sat without invitation. "Lord Blackwood's dinner has become the talk of London, but not in the way he intended." Adrian set down his pen. "Explain." "Public opinion is divided. The old guard is scandalized by your behavior, but the younger generation, and more importantly, several influential women, are calling you brave. There's talk that you've opened a conversation about social responsibility that's been needed for years. And Lydia? Opinions are mixed, but several prominent ladies have sent requests to visit her shelter, to learn more about the work she does. Pemberton pulled out a list. Lady Ashworth, Mrs. Thornhill, even the Duchess of Waverley. They want to help. Adrian felt something like hope. Blackwood's attack backfired. Spectacularly. He's being criticized for his treatment of Miss Hale. Several people have withdrawn from social engagements he's hosting. Pemberton smiled. You've shifted the power balance, made it clear that defending Miss Hale is the socially acceptable position. I didn't do it to be socially acceptable. I know. That's why it worked. Pemberton stood. Your Grace, I've known you since you were a boy. I've watched you waste your potential for years. But last night I saw the man your father hoped you'd become. The words hit Adrian harder than expected. Pemberton, don't ruin it by getting emotional. But Pemberton's eyes were warm. Just keep being that man. For her, for yourself, for everyone who needs someone with power to actually give a damn. After Pemberton left, Adrian sat alone with his coffee and the morning light and the strange, unfamiliar feeling of having done something right. His next visitor arrived before noon, Lydia, accompanied by her father, both looking shell-shocked. Adrian, she said as his butler showed them in, something's happened. He stood immediately. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's... She thrust a paper at him. Read this. It was a letter from the Duchess of Waverley, one of the most influential women in England. Adrian read it once, then again, certain he'd misunderstood. She's donating £5,000 to the shelter, he said slowly. An offering to host a fundraising gala. Lydia's voice was dazed. She says what we're doing is vital work that deserves recognition and support. That's it. There's more. Sir Hale pulled out another letter. Lady Pemberton, £3,000 and an offer to serve on an advisory board. And this, Lydia showed him a third letter. Mrs. Ashworth, £2,000 and a promise to match any donations received in the next month. Adrian looked at the pile of correspondence in her hands. How many of these do you have? 17, so far. She sat down abruptly. Adrian, what did you do? I just defended you. You did more than that. You made it fashionable to care. She looked up at him, eyes wide. These are women who've never given a damn about social causes. But you stood up to Blackwood, and suddenly they want to help. They want to be part of what we're doing. What we're doing, Adrian repeated. I like the sound of that. Sir Hale cleared his throat awkwardly. Your Grace, I owe you an apology. When Lydia accepted your proposal, I thought she'd lost her mind. I couldn't understand why a duke would choose her, or why she'd accept someone she barely knew. He paused. But after last night, after what you did for her, I understand. You're not just choosing her, you're choosing to be better, and she's choosing the same. Sir Hale, let me finish. The older man's voice was thick. I lost my wife 5 years ago. Lydia threw herself into charity work to cope, and I let her. I should have been there for her, should have supported her properly. Instead, I retreated into my books and left her to carry everything alone. He looked at his daughter. But you're not alone anymore. Because you found someone who sees what I should have seen all along, that you're extraordinary. Lydia's eyes filled with tears. Father, I'm proud of you, girl. I should have said it years ago. He turned to Adrian. And I'm grateful to you, Your Grace, for seeing her worth, for fighting for her, for being brave enough to change. Adrian didn't trust his voice. He simply nodded. Sir Hale excused himself, leaving them alone. Lydia stood and crossed to Adrian, taking his hands. You changed everything, she said quietly. We changed everything. Together. I don't know how to do this. How to let people help. How to be part of something bigger. Neither do I, but I think we figure it out together. He pulled her closer. Lydia, I know we agreed to take time, to figure out if this was real. But I need you to know, it's real for me. You're real for me. And I don't want to wait anymore to tell you that. Tell me what? That I'm falling in love with you. The words came out rough but honest. Maybe I already have. I don't know. I've never done this before. But I know that when I'm with you, I'm better. I'm more. And I don't want to go back to who I was before you. Lydia's breath caught. Adrian, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. You're an idiot. He blinked. That's not exactly the response I was hoping for. You're an idiot, she repeated, but she was smiling through tears. Because I've been in love with you for 3 years. Since I was 22 and saw you in that garden and thought you were the most magnificent person alive. I built you up in my head, tore you down when you disappointed me, and somehow fell deeper every time we spoke. You love me. I do. I have. I'm terrified of it. She touched his face. But I'm more terrified of losing you. He kissed her then, properly, the way he'd been wanting to for weeks. She melted against him, hands fisting in his coat, and for a moment the entire world narrowed to just this. Just them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lydia laughed. We're a disaster, she said. The best kind. Adrian rested his forehead against hers. What do we do now? Now? Now we accept all these donations, plan a gala, build something that lasts. She pulled back to look at him. And we do it together, as partners, as equals. As people in love? That too. They stood there in the morning light of his drawing room, holding each other, and Adrian felt the last piece of himself, the part that had been hiding for years, finally settle into place. He was still terrified, still uncertain, still figuring out how to be the person she deserved. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't running from it. He was running toward something instead, toward her, toward purpose, toward the kind of life worth living, and that made all the difference. The Waverly Gala was 3 weeks away, and Adrian had never worked so hard in his life. He'd spent the first week learning the shelter's operations from the ground up, not hovering, not delegating, actually doing the work. He'd repaired broken furniture, organized supply deliveries, and sat through evening meetings where women shared stories that made his chest ache. Stories of survival, of finding the courage to leave, of rebuilding lives from nothing. He'd met Sarah, who'd escaped with her 2 children and now worked as a seamstress. Margaret, who'd arrived with a black eye and left 6 months later to open her own bakery. Anne, who still flinched at loud noises but was learning to trust again. They were wary of him at first. A duke didn't belong in their world. But Lydia vouched for him, and slowly, carefully, they let him in. You're different than I expected, Sarah told him one afternoon while he was fixing a stubborn door hinge. How so? You actually listen. Most men with your money just throw coins at problems and walk away feeling good about themselves. She paused. You stay. Adrian didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and kept working. The second week brought meetings with potential donors. Adrian had called in every favor, leveraged every connection. Some people refused outright, Blackwood's allies mostly, still bitter about the dinner, but others surprised him. Lord Westbrook, who'd seemed hostile that night, donated £1,000 with a gruff note saying he admired commitment, even stupid commitment. Lady Pemberton organized a committee of wealthy women to tour the shelter. They arrived in their finest dresses, expecting something pitiful and tragic. Instead, they found organization, dignity, and women fighting their way back to stability. By the end of the visit, 3 of them were in tears and all of them had opened their checkbooks. I had no idea, one whispered to Lydia. I never thought about where women went when they had nowhere else. Most people don't, Lydia said gently, until they have to. But it was the 3rd week that nearly broke them. Adrian was at the shelter reviewing finances when Lydia burst in, her face white. We have a problem. He stood immediately. What happened? Lord Blackwood filed a complaint with the city. Claims we're operating an unlicensed boarding house. That we're encouraging moral decay. He's demanding an inspection and threatening to shut us down. Adrian felt cold fury settle in his stomach. Can he do that? If the inspector sides with him, yes, we'd lose everything. The women staying here would have nowhere to go. Her hands were shaking. Adrian, this is my fault. If I hadn't challenged him, if I just kept quiet. Stop. He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. This is Blackwood being vindictive because we embarrassed him. This is him using his power to hurt vulnerable people. This is not your fault. But when's the inspection? Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. Adrian's mind raced. All right, here's what we do. We prepare. We make sure every license, every document, every safety requirement is perfect, and we invite witnesses. Witnesses? Lady Ashworth, the Duchess of Waverley. Every influential person who's donated to this cause. He smiled grimly. Let's see Blackwood shut us down in front of half of London's philanthropic elite. They worked through the night, checking records, organizing files, scrubbing every surface until the shelter gleamed. The women who lived there helped, understanding what was at stake. Sarah made tea. Margaret baked bread. Anne, who rarely spoke, organized the children's sleeping area with meticulous care. This place saved my life, she told Adrian quietly around midnight. It can't close. It just can't. It won't, Adrian promised. I swear it won't. He wasn't sure he could keep that promise, but he'd die trying. Morning came too fast. Adrian and Lydia stood in the shelter's main room, both exhausted, watching the clock tick toward 10. They'd sent messages to their supporters. Now they just had to wait and see who showed up. At 10:05, the inspector arrived. He was middle-aged, officious, carrying a clipboard thick with forms. Behind him came Lord Blackwood, looking smugly confident. Your Grace, Blackwood said with false pleasantness. Miss Hale, I trust you're prepared for the inspection? Completely prepared, Lydia said. Her voice was steady despite the exhaustion shadowing her eyes. Excellent. I'm sure you understand this is simply proper oversight, making certain public safety standards are being met. Public safety, Adrian repeated. Is that what you're calling this? Blackwood's smile thinned. I'm calling it my civic duty. The inspector cleared his throat. If we could begin... The door opened. Lady Ashworth walked in, followed by 2 other women from her committee. I hope we're not interrupting, she said sweetly. We heard there was an inspection and wanted to observe. Transparency is so important, don't you think? Blackwood's jaw tightened. This is an official... The door opened again. The Duchess of Waverley, imposing and elegant, swept in with her own retinue. Lord Blackwood, she said coolly, how interesting to find you here. I wasn't aware you took such personal interest in housing inspections. Your Grace, this is hardly a matter of public record? I agree completely. The Duchess settled into a chair uninvited. Please continue. We'll simply observe. Over the next hour, 8 more influential women arrived. They filled the shelter's common room, watching with sharp eyes as the inspector examined every detail. He was thorough. Adrian had to give him that. Checked the kitchen, the sleeping quarters, the plumbing, reviewed licenses and safety protocols. Interviewed several residents, asking about conditions and treatment. Through it all, Blackwood stood watching, his confidence slowly eroding as his plan unraveled. The women who lived there spoke honestly. Yes, it was crowded sometimes. Yes, resources were tight, but they were safe. They were cared for. They were rebuilding their lives. This place gave me hope, Sarah told the inspector. First time in 5 years I've had hope. When the inspection finally concluded, the inspector faced the assembled crowd with visible discomfort. Well, Blackwood demanded. Your findings? The inspector consulted his clipboard. The facility meets all current safety and licensing requirements. There are some areas for improvement, better ventilation in the kitchen, additional fire exits, but nothing that would warrant closure. Lydia sagged with relief. Adrian caught her elbow, holding her steady. That's absurd, Blackwood sputtered. This place is overcrowded, unsanitary. It's neither, the inspector interrupted. I've inspected far worse establishments that operate with full legal standing. This shelter is clean, organized, and serving a legitimate charitable purpose. But the moral implications are not within my purview. The inspector's voice was firm. My job is safety and legal compliance. Both standards are met. Good day, Lord Blackwood. He left. The silence that followed was beautiful. Then the Duchess of Waverley stood. Lord Blackwood, I'm disappointed. Using city resources to harass a charitable organization because of a personal grudge is beneath even you. I was ensuring proper oversight. You were attempting revenge. Lady Ashworth's voice was cold. And you failed. I suggest you leave before you embarrass yourself further. Blackwood looked around the room at faces that had once deferred to him, now regarding him with open contempt. His power, built on deference and fear, crumbled in the face of people who'd found something worth defending. This isn't over, he said to Adrian. Yes, Adrian replied quietly. It is. You've lost, Blackwood. Not because I'm a duke or because I have money. Because what we're doing here matters more than your wounded pride, and people can see the difference. Blackwood left without another word. The moment the door closed, the room erupted. Women crying with relief, donors congratulating Lydia, the Duchess declaring she'd double her contribution for the gala. Adrian found himself standing in the center of chaos, watching Lydia be embraced by women she'd helped, and felt something fierce and proud settle in his chest. She caught his eye across the room and smiled. A real smile, full of exhaustion and triumph, and something deeper. Love, he thought. That's what love looks like. Later, after the donors had left and the residents had returned to their routines, Adrian and Lydia stood in the small office reviewing the inspector's report. "We have to make those improvements he mentioned," Lydia said, already making notes. "Better ventilation, fire exits, maybe expand the kitchen." Lydia. "And we should look into additional safety training for residents, establish better protocols." Lydia. She looked up. "What?" "We won." He took the papers from her hands, set them aside. "We actually won. For now, but Blackwood will try again and we need to be ready." "No." Adrian pulled her close. "Right now we're going to acknowledge that we fought and we won and we're still standing. Later we'll plan. Later we'll prepare. Right now we're just going to breathe." She leaned against him, finally letting the tension drain. "I was so scared." "I know. Me too. What if he'd succeeded? What if the inspector had sided with him? Then we would have fought harder, found another way. But he didn't, and we're here, and it's okay." He kissed the top of her head. "You're allowed to be tired, you know. You don't have to be strong every second. If I'm not strong, everything falls apart." "That's not true anymore. You have help now. You have me." He tilted her face up. "You have an entire network of people who believe in this. You're not alone." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't know how to not be alone. We'll figure it out together." He wiped away her tears with his thumb. "I'm not going anywhere, Lydia. Whatever comes next, we face it together." She kissed him then, desperate and grateful and exhausted. He held her through it, anchoring her, letting her take whatever she needed. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his chest. "The gala's in 4 days." "I know. We're not ready. We'll be ready enough. Adrian, trust me." He stroked her hair. "We've gotten this far on improvisation and stubbornness. 4 more days won't kill us." "It might. Then we'll die together." Very romantic. She laughed, watery but real. "You're impossible." "You love it. I love you." She said it simply, honestly. "Even when you're being ridiculous. Especially when I'm being ridiculous." He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "Marry me. Really marry me. Not because we're trapped or obligated, because I want to spend my life with you, fighting battles, building things that matter, driving each other insane. We're already engaged. I know. But that started as a disaster. I want to ask you properly, with intention." He took her hands. "Lydia Hale, will you marry me? Not because I proposed as a joke, not because society expects it. Because I love you and I can't imagine my life without you in it." Fresh tears welled in her eyes. "That's the second proposal. It's supposed to be better than the first." "Is it?" "Yes. Much better." She smiled through tears. "Yes, Adrian, I'll marry you, again, properly this time." He kissed her again, slower now, sweeter. A promise of everything they were building together. The next 4 days blurred past in organized chaos. Adrian coordinated with staff at Waverly House for the gala. Lydia worked with the women at the shelter to prepare stories and displays that would show donors exactly where their money went. The evening of the gala arrived with unseasonable warmth. Waverly House blazed with light, its ballrooms filled with flowers and music, and London's elite dressed in their finest. Adrian stood at the entrance with Lydia on his arm. She wore emerald green tonight, her hair styled elegantly but not severely. She looked radiant and nervous. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "That's my girl." They entered together to murmurs and stares. The room was packed, easily 300 people, maybe more. All the major names in London society. Even some of Blackwood's former allies, curiosity overcoming their disdain. The Duchess of Waverley greeted them warmly. "Your Grace, Miss Hale, what a triumph this is already. I've never seen such turnout for a charitable cause." "Your support made it possible," Lydia said. "Nonsense. Your dedication made it possible. I'm simply providing the venue." The Duchess smiled. "Now go mingle. Let people see the woman who's changed a duke and changed London's mind about what charity should look like." The evening unfolded in waves of conversation. Adrian introduced Lydia to people who'd dismissed her before, watching them recalibrate their opinions when confronted with her intelligence and passion. She spoke about the shelter without apology, painting vivid pictures of lives transformed. "We're not looking for pity," she told a cluster of wealthy merchants. "We're looking for investment. These women aren't charity cases. They're survivors rebuilding their lives. Give them resources and watch them thrive." One merchant's wife, moved to tears, pledged £500 on the spot. Lord Thornhill approached Adrian at the champagne table. "Veermont, hell of a thing you've done here." "What have I done?" "Made the rest of us look bad." But Thornhill was smiling. "My wife's been on me for weeks to do something meaningful with our money. Says if a duke can get his hands dirty with charity work, her husband certainly can." "Your wife is a wise woman." "She is, which is why I'm pledging £2,000 tonight and probably more later." Thornhill clapped him on the shoulder. "You've changed, old friend. Changed for the better." The speeches came after dinner. The Duchess spoke first, praising the shelter's work. Lady Ashworth followed, sharing statistics about the women helped and the impact on London's most vulnerable population. Then it was Lydia's turn. Adrian watched her walk to the front of the ballroom, spine straight despite her nerves. She looked out at 300 faces and took a breath. "6 years ago," she began, "my mother died. I was 21 and lost. I tried to fill the emptiness with her charity work, tea parties and donation drives that made wealthy people feel good without actually changing anything. The crowd shifted, uncomfortable. Then I met a woman named Catherine. She was hiding in our church with her 3 children, terrified her husband would find her. She had a broken arm, old bruises, and nowhere to go." Lydia's voice was steady. "I couldn't help her. I didn't know how. She left that night and I never saw her again, never knew if she survived." Adrian's chest ached watching her. "I decided that would never happen again, that the next woman who needed help would have somewhere safe to go. So I built it. With my own money at first, then donations, then help from people who believed in the mission." She looked around the room. "We've housed over 100 women in 5 years, given them safety, resources, and time to rebuild. Some are working now, some have left abusive situations permanently, some are still with us healing." She paused. "This work is uncomfortable. It forces us to acknowledge that violence happens in homes that look respectable, that women in our own social circles are suffering in silence, that the structure we've built, marriage, family, honor, sometimes protects abusers and traps victims." Several people looked away. "But discomfort is necessary for change, and change is necessary for justice." Lydia's voice strengthened. "I'm not asking you to feel guilty. I'm asking you to help, to invest in work that transforms lives, to use your privilege to open doors instead of closing them." She stepped down to thunderous applause. Adrian met her halfway across the floor, pulling her into his arms despite the audience. "You were perfect," he whispered. "I was terrified. That too. But mostly perfect." The donations poured in after that. By midnight, they'd raised over £30,000, enough to fund the shelter for 2 years and open a second location. Adrian stood with Lydia on the terrace, watching London spread out below them, and felt like they'd shifted the world on its axis. "We did it," Lydia said quietly. "You did it. I just helped." "We did it together." She turned to him. "Adrian, I need to tell you something." His stomach clenched. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. It's just, I spent 3 years watching you and building you up in my head, creating this perfect version of who you could be. And then I spent months being disappointed when you didn't match that version." "Lydia, let me finish." She took his hands. "But the man you actually are, flawed and scared and trying so hard to be better, he's so much more than the fantasy I created. You're not perfect. You make mistakes. You still use charm to deflect when things get hard. You're learning how to be vulnerable, and you're terrible at it." Is there a compliment coming? You're real, she said simply. You're honest. You show up. You fight for things that matter even when it costs you. You're becoming the person I always hoped you could be, not because I demanded it, but because you chose it. Her voice softened. I love the real you more than I ever loved the fantasy. Adrian couldn't speak around the lump in his throat. I'm not perfect either, Lydia continued. I'm controlling and stubborn. I push people away when I'm scared. I hide behind work instead of dealing with my feelings. I'm still learning how to let someone in. We're both disasters. Complete disasters. She smiled. But we're disasters together, and somehow that makes it work. He kissed her there on the terrace, with London watching, and felt every broken piece of himself settle into place. The wedding was held 6 weeks later in a small ceremony that horrified half of society and delighted the other half. No cathedral, no society spectacle. Just a quiet church service with people who actually mattered to them. Sarah from the shelter served as one of Lydia's attendants. Margaret made the cake. Anne's children scattered flower petals that went everywhere except the aisle, making everyone laugh. Adrian's mother attended, still bewildered by her son's transformation, but charmed by Lydia's directness. Pemberton stood as witness, looking proud enough to burst. Lord Thornhill got drunk and gave an embarrassing toast about Adrian's redemption through love. Lady Ashworth cried through the entire ceremony. Even the Duchess of Waverley attended, lending the event enough prestige that no one could dismiss it as completely scandalous. But the moment that mattered most came when they stood before each other, no masks, no performance, and spoke vows they'd written themselves. I promise to be honest with you, Adrian said, even when it's hard, to fight for us when things get difficult, to be worthy of your trust every single day. I promise to let you in, Lydia replied, even when I'm scared, to share the weight instead of carrying everything alone, to love you as you are, not as I want you to be. They exchanged rings, simple gold bands that had belonged to Adrian's grandmother. When the priest declared them married, the kiss that followed was real and imperfect and absolutely right. The reception was held at the shelter, a choice that raised eyebrows but felt appropriate. They'd transformed the common room with flowers and candles. The women who lived there had cooked, laughing and arguing in the kitchen all morning. It was chaotic and loud, and nothing like a proper wedding breakfast should be. It was perfect. Adrian danced with his new wife while children ran around their feet and donors mingled with residents, and somehow the world kept turning despite this impossible mix of social classes and expectations. We're married, Lydia said, sounding dazed. We are. How did this happen? You called me a coward and I proposed out of spite. Adrian grinned. Best disaster of my life. She laughed. What do we do now? Now we keep doing what we've been doing, building things, fighting battles, driving each other insane. That sounds exhausting. Probably, but at least we'll be exhausted together. She rested her head against his chest as they swayed to music played slightly off-key by a donated quartet. I love you. I love you too. Even when you're being impossible. Especially when I'm being impossible. They danced until the candles burned low, surrounded by the life they'd built from wreckage and stubbornness, and the unwillingness to accept comfortable lies. Years later, standing in their expanded shelter, now 3 buildings housing over 60 women, Adrian would look back on that wedding day as the moment everything truly began. But tonight, he just held his wife and let the future take care of itself. They'd faced worse than whatever was coming, and they'd keep facing it together. The music played on. London sparkled outside. And 2 people who'd started as a joke, trapped by words spoken in anger, found themselves transformed into something real, something worth fighting for, something that would last. Not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Not because they were without flaws, but because they'd chosen each other, scars and all, and built a life on truth instead of pretense. The Duke and the woman who'd called him a coward, the man who'd learned to be brave, and the woman who'd learned to accept help. Partners, equals, allies. In the end, that was all that mattered. Everything else was just details.